fans, and welcome back to the SMITE Pro League powered by Alienware. And you're in Season 8. It's not just about the Alienware peripherals that can enhance your gameplay experience. You can also head on over to needforseat.com and make sure to plug code SMITEMAX for all your Maxnomic chair needs and be able to game and watch the SPL with the ultimate viewing luxury inside that Maxnomic seated gaming chair. So, again, that's needforseat.com. Use code SMITEMAX, and you'll have all the comfort right at your fingertips. But heading into the focus now for set number 2 here today, Gore, we've got the Jade Dragons up against the Olympus Bolts, and this is bound to be, I think, maybe one of the title sets of this weekend.
Yeah, this has been a matchup, like, in Phase 1, it goes 3 games, and the Phase 1 playoffs ends up going only 4 games out of 5, but still, 4 games was pretty fun to watch either way. I'm excited to watch this one because I think the Dragons are looking for blood, and the Bolts are looking to stay up at the top. So there's a lot of, I want to say, just competitive even, nature coming into this one.
And it's important when looking at the schedule, like I already mentioned, the set that took place earlier today, for anybody that might have missed it, Tartarus Titans versus the Valhalla Valkyries. Titans take that one home, 2-0 to their name, pushing them up to 4th in the standings, now sitting at 3-2 for their set record. Meanwhile, Olympus Bolts looking to try and maintain that perfect undefeated streak. Granted, we are still only in week 3, so definitely plenty of sets to come, but this could be an opportunity, I think, for the Olympus Bolts to essentially establish themselves at least as number 1 for split 2 for the time being.
And look, when the next highest team is 3-0, if you're 5-0 up at the top, like, you're feeling not necessarily like you have a cushion lead, but all of a sudden, like, the next set, like, okay, if we end up dropping just 1 to another top team, it's not the end of the world. Granted, I'm sure they don't want that mentality at all. They shove that out of their minds. It's all about the wins. And I think that's the interesting thing, is the Bolts being in such a great spot. Because last year, like, I'm just going to say it how it was. Last year, they did not look this good even half the time that they were playing these games. So that they found that consistency, they found their meta, they found their play style, and whatever is bringing it together this year, I'm loving it.
Well, I think a big part of that actually has to do with the man himself, Barracuda, or Bredacuda, as we have grown to call him, given the fact that he is constantly
Give him a sponsorship,
snacking.
someone. Bread, hit us up.
It'll come eventually, Gore, I promise you.
At Bread on Twitter.
We'll definitely make sure to get something going for the Bread Man, the one and only. But he's got his work cut out for him here today up against the likes of Panicat. Barracuda, I think, has definitely been a key player here, though, for the Bolts. And he's certainly someone that has been in the spotlight and caught his fair share of flack in the past for those performances like you've talked about, Gore. But I think, at least as far as Season 8 is concerned, we've definitely seen enough hunter diversity here from Barracuda that he's certainly let it be known he's not messing around.
So I'm going to start this off doing Barry a little dirty, and then I'm going to bring it back. So I'm just going to preface that this is not the only thing I'm going to talk about. But in the direct matchup, like, Barra, I guess it's like, well, it was Season 6, didn't necessarily have, like, the performance that you would have liked, and I'm sure, of course, he'll say that as well. And the matchup between these two, it's 49 individual game wins in favor of Panicat to 25.
All right, just call him trash scores.
That's where the numbers, he's got about half the wins against Panda that Panda has against him. But the good news is that you're seeing all these highlights, and they're all these gods that not only have been around a while, but I feel like Barracuda flourishes with, that fit really well into the Bolts team play. The Shibalanke he was pulling out a couple of days ago looked really, really solid for him last week as well. So I'm excited to see what they do. Those Artemis highlights from against the Scarabs are always going to be solid. So I'm excited to see what they're going to be able to do, knowing that is actually a hot matchup. Sometimes the carries are just over on their island for a little bit, then they join the team fights. There's going to be some blood over here.
Well, maybe Barra doesn't necessarily have the opportunity to completely even the score for his set record up against Panicat, but we have Barracuda here with us on the pregame interview. And Barra, is a whole green or white? What are we working with today?
Oh, he's muted.
I'm here to inform you, Breadman, you are muted. I'm letting the Breadman know. There's a look
you
of
can
surprise.
see the I am.
Oh,
you can see it in his face.
You're working on it. I believe, pro tip, maybe try a refresher. Take it off, put it back on again.
Wait.
Quick
okay,
refresh,
so I don't know how to.
And we're back.
Okay, so I don't know how to change it, but it's stuck on this one. So if I sound really bad, I'm really sorry.
You know what? We'll work with it. I mean, given the fact that you're eating, I like the full drive-through experience. Thank you. So what's in the cup and what's the combo for today? Is it again whole grain, white, wheat?
Oh yeah, because I was mute earlier. It's 12 green bread. We're working with that today, and then I have my mud in my mug, and then I have my water in my water cup, and then I have my smoothie in my smoothie cup. You know,
How do
so I
you
have all the bases covered for everything.
how do you micromanage 3 different beverages at once?
I'm just gonna, I take a bite of bread and then I start drinking a random liquid, and then I take another bite of bread, and then I turn over here and pick a random liquid, and then, yeah, just kind of like rinse, repeat the entire SPL set.
If anybody's ever wondering what's going through the brain of an ADC main, that's
Hmm.
about as good of a summation as we could possibly hope for. But Bera,
Hmm.
we had our own little dabble of experiences, talking through the sets that we saw with Jade Dragons on yesterday. Are you at all
Hmm.
intimidated knowing that Panda Cat has a fully trained Tusky that he might be able to work with today?
Okay, yeah, that man's Tusky will literally wait out relics and hit afterwards, and then meanwhile mine just sits there and watches people kill me, and then he just like goes and attacks some minions over here. I'm just like, yeah, I don't want to play against his Tusky. His Artemis is, I can play against that, but his Tusky is a whole nother thing. And also, if I play Artemis today, there's gonna be some Barabors, and I'll just miss him, and I'll be like, I just wish I had PCAT's Tusky AI, because I don't know if he treats his animals better than I do.
Maybe he
I
feeds
don't know if
his.
it's like
Yeah, I don't
true.
really see you sharing your bread a whole lot. I kind of
I
like,
didn't know I
you
was
just
supposed
destroy
to.
it on your own. I think you're supposed to feed your pets. Just saying.
I mean,
Pro life tip.
if
You
if
know.
I could figure out a way to feed Tusky in the game, I would. Trust me, 100%. Because that stupid little boar has wronged me so many times, so I feel like we have a relationship to work on. But yeah, oh
Well,
yeah, we should probably talk about some actual Smite, huh? Do you?
well,
Is there
actually, I think we've
Smite?
gotten everything we need to from you, Vera. I
Okay,
appreciate it though greatly. We certainly managed to keep it right on topic as always with you
Thank
in
you.
the pregame interview. For real, thank you so much for joining us, and again, good luck to you guys in your set up against the Jade Dragons.
Thank you. Bye, Taco. Love you.
My hair, I love you too. I love Destiny more though. I'm just gonna say it. I'm sorry, man. It's nothing personal. I saw you with Dulce the other day, and then the whole aggro recovery thing. I don't know, man. Destiny is she's just true and faithful. There's not much else to it, Gore.
And I will say though, Barra had the best tweet after all of that, which was someone was just like, "Man, look how short Barra is." And he's like, "I'm 6'1". I can't help that Dave is just Hercules."
Yeah, I
over
wouldn't know
here."
anything about that, the whole height disparity
Yeah,
thing, but
I was happy. Look, Taco, having you come back, I experienced what it was like to be you for a little bit when everybody else is like 6 foot over, and I'm sitting here just like I have to look up to every cast. Like I was lucky. Like me and Miff, if we cast, we're like close enough in height, but anytime I'm with Dave, I have to look up. My neck starts to hurt.
Well, I think ideally here, this could potentially be an opportunity, I think, for the Jade Dragons and the Olympus Bolts to really showcase
Yeah.
some of those developments over time, getting things a little bit more back on track. All fun and jokes aside, we really have seen very dominant performances out of Panda Cat all throughout the entirety of Season 8 so far, and even before then, I think Panda Cat has certainly made himself a hunter to be feared
Yeah.
here in the SMITE Pro League. And I think one thing that's also incredibly interesting when it comes to the whole Bera Panda matchup, Gore, aside from the fact that they're both animals in their names, there's the fact that Panda Cat and Barracuda have a tendency, I think, to share a fairly similar god pool as far as what their teams want to prioritize
Yeah.
for them.
I think that's actually going to make things a lot more just spicy today overall. Like we haven't gotten to see Panda Cat pull out like a Shabalanke, which Bear's been going to a few times. But you had mentioned the Artemis specifically up against Barracuda here, and it's just something that Panda Cat's been running really well. Pretty much since Phase 1 playoffs, Panda Cat has looked like a whole different beast to tackle. And honestly, throughout a lot of Phase 1, he had a lot of those performances, but I feel like the playoffs opened a door for the carries to really, really start looking good, and Panda Cat has been a driving force for it. You throw in the Artemises, the Chirons if you want to, the Danzaburos, but they're just the top of the litter. I imagine that they're going to expand into even more this set.
Do you expect whoever is first pick here today between these two teams to be a priority ban against Artemis? Because with Barra and Pendagat both showing so much preference for it, Awesome Jake cashing out, just living it up big on his own private yacht, as Awesome Jake tends to do.
I'm so concerned for the bans now because that you've highlighted that, like, if you're looking at the screens, I'm guessing Bolt's our first pick. Like, I kind of don't want Barra to get Artemis. I could imagine them first picking it as well. And so, I mean, what are you banning? You want to ban a Tiamat. Are you going to ban Sol? Are you going to ban the Morrigan? Are you going to ban Serket? Those were some of the routes that the Scarabs win. Fenrir is an actual, like, genuine threat. Gilgamesh, specifically Lasbra's Gilgamesh, is a very big threat. I think this is going to be an interesting one to tackle because there's so much that the Bolts could first pick and look good with.
Well, fortunately for us, Gore, we don't have to keep it guessing for much longer because we've got the picks and bans for game number 1 actually coming up here shortly. And with Bolts being in that first pick position, like you just highlighted, it should be interesting because if they choose to try and prioritize the Artemis for Barracuda, then I would imagine that some combination of Tiamat and Odin certainly can't be allowed to go through because they'd be such strong response picks for the Jade Dragons.
And the other interesting thing is you have to start accounting for the fact that you can't let Sam get Mercury. Like, that's just been a thing. Like, again, one of the only junglers who's playing it, one of the only teams that has been locking it in. Granted, they were doing it a lot more specifically against Chiron, but I feel like he's going to be pretty well spirited against some of the other junglers that are available. So I'm interested to see if the Dragons are either going to A, pick up a Mercury if he's let through, or if the Bolts have to ban it because of how prominent it's been for the Dragons.
Seems as though mid lane priority bans are what are reigning true here for the Jade Dragons. Morgan and Tiamat not going to make it into Venenu's hands this go round, and an Artemis ban from the Bolts, even though they are in that first pick position and could have taken it for themselves, showcasing that they don't really feel all that confident wanting to take that Artemis given the threat that Finoke has proven himself to be with the likes of an Odin.
I'm wondering if that's something that you could give yourself a little bit of credit for. Like, you put it into Barra's mind of, oh, wait, yeah, I really don't want to play against his Artemis. He knows it. But it does open up a lot of things. Again, we saw, the highlights, Danzaburo, Artemis, so that's 2 shots immediately at Panda Cat. And then you just have to think of matchups. Like, what has he been locking in other than that? Chiron a few times. Again, no necessarily like Shibalanques like Barra's been playing. So there's a lot more flexibility, I think, for the Bolts right now than where the Dragons are.
But again, this all kind of comes back to that same discussion of both of these teams tend to kind of circulate a lot of similarities as far as their drafts are concerned. Amir, Yamoja, Fafnir.
Oh, jeez.
The prime time of the support front line. Completely up for grabs here for both of these teams. Wouldn't even be surprised to potentially see the likes of a Kabrakan starting to shine through maybe here for the Jade Dragons, but mobility seems to be the Jade Dragons' primary focus here as they'll take Giannis for Hurry Win, and there's the Yamoja takeaway from Awesome Jake. Polar Bear Mike, I think, has definitely showed himself to be a formidable opponent whenever he gets this water goddess on his side, so I like the mobility already from the Jade Dragons. I think that there's a ton of cutoff potential as well in teamfight engagements just between that through space and time and River's Rebuke.
He's 7 for 7 on these Giannis games this year. Herwin has not been getting this pick a lot, and granted, he kind of got nerfed pretty heavily. There were a lot of discussions about whether or not he was still going to be very prominent. It was somebody that was getting first banned against pretty much every single team. Nobody wanted to play against the Giannis, and then he dropped to the point where nobody was picking him anymore. But we saw it, granted, maybe with a grain of salt. What was that, yesterday, where he said, like, look, if y'all saw that build from ahead, you'd be really worried about it. It was there was some discussion about whether or not it was
the no pen
solid.
build, the no pen Giannis trademark there from Hurrywin. But hey, the guy's so talented, he finds a way to make it work regardless. And if a win's a win, Gore, at the end of the day. And although I will say, I don't expect that to be the case here for Hurrywin here today. I think up against the likes of the Bolts, he'll probably want to put a little bit more preference towards having some of that early penetration online sooner than you think. The Erlong hover here is interesting, though, because Erlong, God, that has a lot of initiation potential, and I think they could work for sure alongside of the Emoji and the Giannis because you do have enough of that early game presence to actually be able to apply a lot of that pressure from the Erlong Shen. My primary concern, though, Serket, Fafnir, both relatively strong gods at counteracting Erlong.
Especially, I mean, Serket, hey, he just hit your taunt. Cool, I'm going to go ahead and make all of that healing moot. You're not going to get anything off of that when I ult you. It also doesn't necessarily, like, it's not a bad pick for Sam, but in my mind, it's also not a very Sam-oriented pick. I mean, there's a lot of setup, as you had highlighted, but I like to, like, Sam typically gets on those carries, and actually, they ban in a Wheelish. They might think that it's not even going to be Sam playing it.
there is a chance for picks like this Erlong to be relatively flexible amongst a team like the Jade Dragons.
Since we've seen an Erlong solo.
But you have to remember that Fino K,
he'll play
Oliver,
anything.
Mike, Sam, they all have, I think, the individual mechanical talent available to make it work. And it's that threat of the flexibility that I think is crucial here, because the Bolts still have to look at potential jungle bans as options, since they don't want to allow an ideal, because you already have the knockup from Riptide, you already have the possible knockup from Erlong Shen's transformation in that third stance for the turtle form, and you just don't really want to risk that easy of a setup opportunity. Plus, Awelish relatively strong as is against the Circuit because of her ambush, and Fafnir as well, with a lot of that jump and initiation power, not going to be as effective if Awelish is on the playing field. But an on-her ban, it's just continuing to be the reign of focusing out Panda Cat's God Pool as the theme here for the Bolts.
I mean, if you want it, because I'll just give Sam the credit, right? That Fenrir is also a Fine OK and mainly a PBM shot as well, but it's Panda Cat, Sam. Panda Cat, Sam, Panda Cat. That's their bans. They were like, who do we need to control here? And it seems like, again, even though Herowind is such a huge threat, Fino's a huge threat, PBM's a huge threat, they're trying to narrow down the carries a little bit more. And they know, depending on what type of Giannis we get today from Herowind, that's something that they can handle a little bit more easily. Although, normally this is a spot where I talk about Jake, and he loves going Ares against Giannis. That's so great, but he's got the Fafnir. Still some decent lockdown, maybe not as consistent as they'll need.
Curious if Haddox might actually lean back towards that Guan Yu, although I think that the Guan Yu is a little bit more reserved for the Bolts whenever they actually have the Emoja on their side, just because of the sustain that's being able to be dogpiled on top of each other, which is just nice for a team fighting environment. The Hover of Sobek, though, could be an interesting switch up. Haddox, being such an aggressive play style, I do think that he could certainly be effective when piloting the Sobek in that solo lane, but he might lose a little bit of that edge in terms of just how aggressive he can be with the laning pressure.
I don't expect Sobek and Cullen, I don't really see Sobek being the one getting the kills in that lane. I don't expect him to be losing that lane too often either. He's just going to, again, what most Guardians like to do over there, go net neutral, wait until some setup's going to come through. But the good news is Sobek plus Circuit, not only is there a ton of displacement, but Lasper is going to have a lot of setup for him. So the 2v1s and the gank potential over there in solo lane maybe goes up a little bit here for the Bolts.
And a Cupid lock-in. Been a hot minute since we've seen Cupid actually make his way into the SMITE Pro League playing field, Gore, but I really like the flavor that he introduces for the rest of this Jade Dragons composition. You've got the River's Rebuke all ready from the emoji. You've got through space and time as well to be super restrictive in terms of space presence in the team fights throughout the jungle and around those objectives, but Fields of Love, huge cutoff opportunity here, and I think that the main game plan for the Jade Dragons, by the looks of their composition, they're not going to let Bera have a whole lot of fun with this Xbalanque pick. If they really want to kill him, they can easily commit with this type of dive.
Yeah, there's a lot of lockdown and chase down for a Xbalanque here, and they, I would say, could swap that and let Vin pilot Xbalanque, but I just don't know how well that's going to work for them, so keep him on the soul. And that's another thing that the Cupid does. So not only is the lane matchup, I think, going to be pretty beneficial for Panda Cat, but I think when it translates to the team fights, it ends up expanding to even more. It's helpful against Circuit, it's helpful against Soul. Depending on how well Panda Cat's doing, it might force a relic change out of Jake to go for something like the Heavenly Agility, deal with some of those sprints, because it can shut down a Cupid ult really well for your team and might be necessary to help out the counter matchups here.
Always important to note, though, that global blind presence that's going to be available for the Olympus Bolts, so those jungle fight spaces, while maybe a little bit restricted by the Giannis and the Emoja, could still definitely head in the Bolts' favor, given the fact that Jade Dragons, well, they kind of need vision to actually stick and commit to a target, so if they're completely shut off from the outside world thanks to that Darkest Nights ultimate from the Xbalanque, that could be a prime opportunity, I think, for the Bolts to have a really strong counter engage, especially when you have the likes of a Fafnir and Sobek and two relatively strong hunters whose passives, I think, are great for objective burn.
And this is on, I don't know, it's such a big threat. You get a good Yamoja pickup right here. You get the Giannis. You have two, maybe three, depending on if you want to throw Fino's Kakulin into this mix, that are just kind of signature picks for the Dragons. A Cupid, which Panda Cat has already won with this year once and has a good matchup. This is a good threatening draft from the Dragons.
I think both these teams got exactly what they were looking for here, Gore, but game number one for the Olympus Bolts versus the Jade Dragons, and all the action is going to be taking place with Dulcin and Mifflin.
Thank you, Taco. Thank you, Gore, for the most anticipated matchup, maybe, of this weekend. The Olympus Bolts. I got to throw the underscore there. Can't make anyone feel bad. But I'll call it my most anticipated matchup of the weekend. The Olympus Bolts up against the Jade Dragons. Dolson, Mifflin, Doug will be bringing you the action. And Miff, I think this is such a weird world where Bolts versus Dragons in Phase 1, I think it's all Dragons all day in the predictions. As of late, though, especially with the way that Phase 2 has gone so far, a lot of people leaning towards the Bolts.
Yeah, I think Caster's predictions had everyone going Bolts except for Aggro, who votes with the community. So we need to find this dub. No way Aggro gets to be the only guy right on the team. He's insufferable enough as is. And I think the Bolts have got themselves a draft that can certainly do it. It's a very consistent draft. Lazarus finds a pick that he is very comfortable on inside of the Surcat. Jake has had great strides on this Fafnir pick as well. It's going to be a very objective, focused composition. That's generally the rule of the game when you're rocking double Hunter plus Fafnir.
It feels like Lazarus felt so comfortable on that Gilgamesh, the Surcat. Another pick that's often not allowed to be played by Lazarus, or at least picked around, because we have seen him absolutely control the jungle on this pick. Veneno will be on the Soul here out of the mid lane up against Hurdy, went back on the Giannis. And we had this conversation a little bit yesterday during the Dragon set, where early in Season 8, it was Hurdy wins Giannis, and it was the talk of the town. Do you ban it? Do you pick against it? We had segments dedicated to talking about that. Has been on a bit of a back burner since then, but still maybe in a very strong spot here, and I think the way we all like to word it, Miff, sometimes all it takes is one. One through space and time could turn a game around. Hurdy won, I think, was 1-4 to start off the set yesterday on the Giannis, and things really turned around. So there's a big threat really on both sides. Big burst damage that could set up team fights for Ven and for Hurrywind.
You know what it was? It might have been the salty Tower Boy incident that kind of put the kibosh on this consistent Giannis pick.
That's right.
Since then, Hurrywind hasn't really been going for it too often now, trying to bring it back up against Venenu himself. I'm excited for it. I said yesterday that it looked like he was a little bit rusty on this pick, was struggling to find his initiations exactly where he wanted to portal in, but he definitely cleaned it up as the game went on, and well, now hot hands, got to expect he's going to be pretty good on it here today.
Yeah, I want to see what Hurrywind's going to get done here in game number 1. Polar Bear Mike receiving a lot of damage from Barracuda as he whirls on around. Polar Bear Mike disarmed, but not enough damage from Bear. There's a stun on the back end.
What?
Panicat, who's got big damage here. First blood right around the corner, but who's going to get it? Barracuda not yet. Panicat guns him down, and the Jade Dragons on the board first.
Man, what a crazy bait there. Mike, it was so low HP. Gets around the corner, and there was no chase potential as the Rising Jaguar was already used by Barracuda. The turnaround, so clean. Jake blocks maybe 20 auto attacks, but needed to block some more.
And what's important here is then on the back end, so it's first blood over to Panicat and then a purple buff invade as Sanford Soccer makes his way to the left side jungle. That'll put the Olympus Bolts dual lane just a little bit further behind. Polar Bear Mike, well played there, and Jake used about everything there on that Fafnir. Sunder got used early on into that fight, got great damage in, but it was just not enough. Panicat on this Cupid I think will be interesting to follow along with as well, because it's just such a unique pick that has seen some play, been in and out of the meta a little bit here. Has the ability to take those skirmishes, though, and we see that early here in Game 1.
And he's going to get his ultimate a little bit more quickly as well. We heard it on the desk. Maybe you see a Heavenly Sprint get picked up by the Olympus Bulls just to deal with the Fields of
Watch
Love.
Out,
then, in some trouble, but still has to separate, bud. Don't have to be worried, but nice portal!
Whoa, the damage is big, but not enough to get the kill onto Venenu, and that's pretty simple there. Sanford Soccer just walks up, gets the pin, wails on Venenu for a moment, and Hurrywind is there to follow up with the damage. Through Space and Time is online now. Venenu has his ultimate there as well. And so it's right around that early mark. We're just shy of 4 minutes here into this game. We'll cross over it by the end of the sentence. And that's where Hurrywind can start making some plays here. Instead, the plays will happen over in the duo lane. Barracuda doesn't have much of a chance here. The best you can do is turn around some damage. Sanford Soccer rotates around the backside, but it won't be needed here as Polar Bear Mike gets the opening kill onto Barracuda, but Sanford Soccer is going to be useful as a double kill for the Emoja rolls its way in.
And this all off the back of that great bait earlier on from PBM. Thinnest of margins separates this one. Olympus Bolts, had they been able to shut down this Emoja, you could say these last 3 kills would not have happened. But now the Jade Dragons have such a massive lead early on. And, well, Hurrywind can't say he isn't experimenting here in the no-boots world. Goes for the Pythags piece in that first slot.
Wow.
A little bit of CDR, a little bit of lifesteal. I like this item, but how is it going to affect the rest of his build? We might see him go towards that Typhon's Fang just to further go down that lifesteal tree and find some penetration as well, but I am curious. It's not often you see Giannis itemized this way, especially when you consider Chronos Pendant's kind of core. You want that as early as possible.
Right, you want that up a little bit more frequently, and especially without going for the CDR starter item there. Sometimes you kind of go one or the other. Chronos Pendant, if you don't go, Sands of Time to start off. So we'll see how Conduit Gem into the Pythax piece feels for Hurrywind early on here. Stable levels in the mid lane. Videnu and Hurrywind both equal there. Things have been quiet over on the right-hand side of the map. Haddox playing something that we're a little bit more used to here, Mifflin. It's the Sobek, the Guardians over in the solo lane. Vampiric Shroud, the starter item there for Haddox up against Final K, who will be able to mitigate a little bit of that healing. But what have you seen here from this Sobek out of the solo lane? Are you sacrificing maybe some early pressure just for extra tankiness in the late game? Is that the big trade-off?
You're essentially sacrificing your entire ability to find a solo kill ever. I mean, Sobek is not going to shut down Kakullen without the help of his jungler and likely his mid laner as well, which means that this might be one of the first looks we have at Haddox instead of Chadix, because normally he likes to play things like the Hercules, the King Arthur, things that can just run you down, find those early kills, find those early rotations. Instead, this is much more facilitator-esque god. Has great backline disruption, to be sure, but is more so in line with what does my team need? How am I going to play around it? Can I help Ven? Can I help Barracuda? He's got his eyes set on the team fight.
Well, it's difficult right now because I think the Olympus Bolts need a lot of help. It's 3 kills for the Jade Dragon. Sanford Soccer will take half of his HP as Videnu drops down the ultimate. But those 3 kills have transformed or made themselves aware to the tune of 1,500 gold in the lead for the Jade Dragons here. That's a sneaky Riptide from PBM, forces Barracuda to walk forward right into the Cupid ultimate. Panda Cat will drop the stun that won't end up being a stun onto Awesome Jake, but look at just this pressure that's being absorbed, Myth, by the duo lane. Lasbra could make some waves here, but he's on his own. No one else from the Olympus Bolts is going to be able to drop back and help out with this fight unless Awesome Jake and Barracuda get in late. Goodbye. Hurrywind deletes Lasbra, then through space and time helps close the gap onto Videnu, who's just casually rotating on in from the mid lane. The Jade Dragons playing like something possessed right now, and Hurrywind will help out Sanford Soccer in another kill.
The Jade Dragons have come to play. 5 kills in 7 minutes for the Chaos team, and that is a heads-up awareness play from the Dragons. They spot out Lasbra on a ward. You saw the ping come through, and it's an immediate collapse. We're not concerned with this duo lane. Jake and Barracuda both below 20% HP, but not the targets. It's Lasbra who falls down immediately, and then Hurrywind with the through space and time to chase out the kill onto Ven. It is constant aggression, and it's already netted the Dragons just about 3,000 gold.
And this is just like, this is peak Dragons, isn't it? When you talk about the Jade Dragons and the pace that they like to play and what play style they have, you always talk about the early game. You talk about the early aggression, the rotation, the consistent team play. And I'm not going to sit here and tell you we haven't seen that this year. I think we've just seen more variety out of the Dragons. They've been a team that can wait until the mid game, wait until the late game. But when you think of Dragons and this roster from last year, of course, Hurrywind coming in, it was all early game, all pressure, all the time, and we're getting a little bit of a taste of that now in game number 1. We're 8 minutes in. We're getting above a 2,000 gold lead here, and while small in the grand scheme of SMITE, that's the type of lead, Myth, that this Dragons team can really push.
And at 8 minutes, that is pretty sizable. I mean, we're looking, if this pace keeps up around the 15-minute mark, it could start to slowly slip out of the Bolt's control. Lasbra getting involved. Sam caught out.
Oh, that's a good portal and a good taunt from Sam for Soccer. Hurrywind and Sam, the 1-2 punch, peels out the engage there on the mid lane, and Awesome Jake and Lasbra are going to have to turn tail. That's kind of a good segue into my next thought here, where Sam has just been all over the place here in this game. I wonder what PBM is going to maybe look for here. Could be a collapse in on the tier 1 tower. No, instead Gold Fury actually started up here by the Jade Dragons. Red buff as well. PBM's just going to try to solo that one out and complete the solo, but Gold Fury taken low here. Barracuda rotating on over. Jade Dragons take the Fury. Barracuda gets the first kill of the game for the Olympus Bolts, and it's on to Sanford Soccer, but of course Mike is going to hit that one. It's a inch perfect Rivers Rebuke, and PBM on a killing spree.
Jade Dragons, just a war on multiple fronts. All right, guys, you want to defend your red buff? Well, we're already on the gold free. You want to go to the gold free? Well, your red buff's going to go down. It's just posing multiple questions to the Olympus Bolts, and they are hard questions to answer. Where are you going to dig in your heels? Where are you going to show up for the defense? The Jade Dragons are aggressive all over the map, and it's not a calculated style. It's not a slow-paced battle. It's not as if we're we're watching a chess match. This is the Jade Dragons coming out in the first quarter and just swinging wildly, and it is working out so well.
We're watching a chess match where the Jade Dragons have knocked all of the Bolt's pieces except for the king off the board, and they've just slapped their king right in front of it and called checkmate. That's not how chess works.
No, that's a whole different game you're talking. I don't even know what is that, bud?
Maybe checkers is what I'm going for here. I don't know.
There are no kings in checkers.
When you flip it, doesn't it become a king? You say king me?
Oh my gosh. I'm so sorry to all the checkers fans at home.
I got and then you got now neither of us know how either of those. It's pretty apt that two cerebral, heavy thinking type games, you and I have no clue how they work. Smite, a game that requires some of that. You know how that works, so that's pretty good on your end. Jade Dragons continuing to roll over the Olympus Bolts here in game number 1 is really what I was trying to get at with my very on-point chess metaphor there. 10.5 minutes and the gold lead has just gotten worse. Hurrywind has looked great so far. Honestly, honest, it does end up being a Chronos pendant for that second completed item there for Hurrywind, so the cooldown reduction is there. Some early penetration and lifesteal, though, thanks to the Pythags piece, is feeling good. Venenu has a little bit of that here as well, and Myth, he might need it. Look, with the way that this game is going, Bancroft's into what looks like might be a Typhon's Fang. Seems like it'll be all but necessary for this soul.
It's going to help him out a lot with his ability damage, but is slowing down the auto attacks ever so slightly. But with the neutral objectives looking as they are, with the control that the Jade Dragons have, I mean, I don't see the bolts going towards a Pyromancer or a Gold Fury anytime soon.
Well, look at this. Jake accepts the Riptide from PBM. Barracuda left alone. Baits out the ultimate from Sanford Soccer there a little bit, but Sanford Soccer returns the favor. And now Barracuda, of course, it's Barracuda. He's going to get hit by that every time, and it's Hurrywind. He'll hit those every time. Barracuda now 1-4. Where do you think all that pressure's been going, Miff? Over into the duo lane, over onto this X-Ball, and the Olympus Bolts. Poor duo lane has just not had a moment to breathe.
Man, is it Hurrywind playing really well today, or is it Hurrywind getting the counter matchup into Barracuda? Awesome, Jake caught out a little bit here, but no Omi for PBM until he drops this ult.
Yeah, it's an okay ult from PBM this time, a leap away from Lasbro will secure the escape, and then a disapparate from Venenu there as well. Mike trying to keep that pressure on, a stun connects there. Maybe you're thinking something could happen. Instead, it's a pluck in onto PBM by Haddix. A portal onto the back line slows down the re-engagement from the rest of the bolts. Damage from Venenu is just a bit shy there, but look at Haddix. He wants to keep going. He wants more. Barracuda is back up from base, so maybe this is a chance for the bolts to catch the Dragons a bit off guard, and Sanford Soccer the one tossed back.
He's going to have to retreat here. Haddix not quite on the mark, but does find the tail whip, and that will be a kill for Barracuda. The dot damage from Poison Darts putting in the work there. Jade Dragons stick around a little bit too long. Stick around and let Haddix find multiple plucks as well. A lot of beads burned there. Both Hurrywind and PBM lose out on their defensive relics, so that is going to be a good first step for the Olympus Bolts, but it is just exactly that, the first step. We're still looking at 3,000 gold in the lead for the Jade Dragons.
And, you know, I had a conversation with the Bolts on Monday around actives, things like that. I brought up Sunder, and, you know, there were plenty of chuckles, and, you know, the conversation sort of flowed around this item. And they seem to think, and now we can see on the relic pickup, that you at least want one Sunder on your team most of the time. In some cases, and maybe many cases, you want double Sunder. And they're going to have it. Haddix fully upgrades that Sunder. Awesome Jake is going to have it there as well. So maybe there's a world where enough of those charges connect, you can make quick work of these fights, but still, you know, a tough hill to climb. But maybe that aggressive avenue is a way back in.
To speak to the argument around Sunder, it essentially makes it where you don't have to be too choosy with your target. Very often in competitive Smite, you really can only hit the frontliners because they're doing such a good job of creating space. If Haddix is standing between you and the back line of the Olympus Bolts, well, you can't just ignore him. Sunder all of a sudden would make it a little bit easier to shut him down.
Stun onto Hurrywind, then he's tossed right back into the fray, but look at the Aegis, it avoids
Goodness.
So much damage there, and then there's a knockup from Sanford Soccer, and down goes Lasbro, and the Jade Dragons, they turtle up underneath that tier 1 tower and turn down the engage of Laz, who is now 0-2 on this Circuit. Look, it was well timed. Hurrywind doesn't have beads for another 45 seconds by the end of this sentence. Unfortunately, the Aegis was still up, and that avoids death.
It does. Hurrywind playing so well right now around his positioning, around his target selection. These ganks have been on time as well. And now the Olympus Bolts going to be suffering from a lack of jungler for the next 5 seconds, which is unfortunate timing again, as the Jade Dragons could start to look towards the Oni Fury, but it's the Bolts actually who started up.
You think this has got to be a bit of a response check, right? If the Dragons show up, we're peeling off a bit,
Going
but we're
low.
too far in now. We've committed too much, and the Jade Dragons steal a away the Fury. No rest for the Olympus Bolts as PBM throws up the Rivers Rebuke and Barracuda wants nothing to do with it. Out he spins, but it's a pin, of course, and a double knockup from Sam for Soccer. The Jade Dragons get the Fury, and they'll get more. The Tier 2 tower being dove.
Then on the retreat, and the Heart Bomb delivered to him by Jake. Unfortunate double kill for Final K. Lazra and Haddix just got to limp away from this one. Jade Dragons just have so much of the momentum. The Olympus Bolts decide that, all right, we're too deep into it. It's down to 10%. We have to finish off this Oni Fury. Well, the Jade Dragons were already there. That was thin margins that gets them that steal. And then the team fight afterward, obviously going to favor the team that wasn't tanking up the objective.
God, this is brutal. I mean, look, Oni waves are dealt with aptly by either team here at this point, but that wouldn't have been nice, wouldn't it, for the Bolts? They get a little bit of space with these Oni waves. Fine, okay. 2v1 here on the right-hand side through space and time's not going to be there. Oh, Fine, okay, turns it around, and PBM is there with some healing as well. Fino is going to live. I'm casually calling that, assuming it's all said and done. But it never is. It never is with Final K, and in this game, apparently nothing's going to go right for the Bolts.
I was so ready to roast Final K for up-downing with the Salmon Leap instead of going towards the portal, but he knew the healing was coming his way. He knew PBM has his back. Jade Dragons turn around a miraculous team fight to be completely fair and pick up the Pyromancer as well. I mean, this one's far removed for the Olympus Bolts here. We're looking at 10,000 gold just about at the 16-minute mark. This could be a rotation towards the Fire Giant right now from the Jade Dragons. And, well, I'm not sure that the Olympus Bolts even want to take that fight, even though it is only 16 minutes into this one.
Agro's in the green room right now counting his money. Not that we all put any money on this one. We've learned better. But here's this turnaround. He is so low in this fight. My goodness. Yeah, what? 15 HP? Is that what that was? Didn't catch on the health bar. That is ridiculous. He was one auto away from dead there. It was planned, right? Jade Dragons planning, though. Around this FG now, Rivers Rebuke from PBM. It slows things down, and the Jade Dragons secure the FG. Panda Cat will secure the kill onto Haddix on the back end, and Fino K continues his tear. No chance for Bananu here. It's another one for the Kukulkan.
Man, I was saying yesterday I was worried about the Jade Dragons' ability to push their leads. They were so far in the lead in their last set for so long, and they weren't quite able to close it out. Seems like they've alleviated those issues, man. This is a crazy pace being set here by them. And already knocking on the door of the Titan. Probably not an end. If they could stop both these backs on the left-hand side, keep your eye on Sam. If he can keep Lazra and Barra out, they could look for the end.
Sam for Soccer. 2v1 here. Barracuda uses the Aegis. Sam for Soccer just shy of the kill here. Barracuda turns it around. It's a taunt in from Lazra, and it won't be the double turnaround from the Jade Dragons this time. Mid lane Phoenix goes down. And that's the call for the back off now for the Jade Dragons. Mid lane Phoenix gone. Couple of towers on the left-hand side of the map still stand. Hey, we got 1,500 gold on a few members of our team. Let's go back, spend up, and siege up these towers.
And it's not like they're too pressed for time either. We still got 4 minutes left on this Fire Giant tower play. Yeah. Do whatever you guys want. 2 towers still standing on that left-hand side. Likely going to be the target here. And the Olympus Bolts going to likely put up their defense around the Phoenixes itself. I don't see them really stepping up to the Tier 2 tower, maybe potentially for a soft defense. It's really up to Ven to keep these minion waves out. It's really up to Awesome Jake and Haddix to facilitate the fight, but initiation not looking too good. Raffer said it last year, when you're behind on Sobek and somebody has their beads up, well, Pluck kind of just spells your death.
Yeah, I'm dashing into the enemy team at that point. Luckily, if Sanford Soccer or Hurrywind for the next minute or minute and a half are the 2 targets, their beads will be down. So maybe that's something that Haddix will look towards, but fine, okay. PBM, Panda Cat, they all have beads ready to go. You're pretty apt there, pretty smart myth. The Olympus Bolts don't step up underneath any of these towers. Instead, they're going to do their best to push out some of these waves while the Jade Dragons work on in towards this left side Phoenix. The right target for the Jade Dragons to take here. If this game goes on to the next FG, a weakened or a down Phoenix on the left-hand side is going to make sieging up that FG just a little bit better here. I mean, there's got to be the stand, right? If the Jade Dragons run this fight, you're looking at game.
You are, and that Phoenix is going down so quick. The Bolts are not putting up much of a defense. Lazra does have the flank, and Jade Dragons taking a much slower approach to this Phoenix. Don't want to put any risk up to it. Sanford Soccer does not have Fire Giant, so he's going to be very reliant on the Emoja and his own ultimate for sustain. This slow pace, again, can't hurt the Jade Dragons too much. We still have 2.5 minutes left on this Fire Giant. What?
Yeah, this one's been quick. We got a Phoenix like 10 seconds into this Fire Giant buff in a minute and 15. left on the remaining. Look
There
at the
it
blitz
is.
on in through space in time from Hurrywind. Clips over onto Haddix as PBM throws up the walls here, and Barracuda caught in the front line, and Panda Cat puts him in the dirt. Lasbra limping away from the rest of this fight here, but Sanford Soccer's going to run him down. The Riptide from PBM pulls Venenu right back into the fray. The kills aren't rolling through just yet, but everyone from the Bolt has to retreat here. It's a killing spree for Hurrywind, and the Jade Dragons turn their eyes to the Titans.
Still 3 members of the Bolts alive. Can
Venenu's
look
gotta
to put
go
up
big.
a defense. Has to go big.
Venenu comes back out from the fountain here, does not have his ultimate. Lasbra jumps into the back line, the heart bomb onto the Circuit. Titan above half HP,
Yikes.
the portal perfectly placed. Goodbye, Lasbra. Now the Jade Dragons only have 2 members of the Bolts to work through here, but the Titan won't care. Jade Dragons in 20 minutes take game 1.
This is not the Jade Dragons that played against the Solar Scares. This is not the Jade Dragons we've seen in the last couple of weeks. That was Ghost Gaming that we just saw.
Yep.
Early game dominance through and through. And, well, we've talked to Mike in the past about it. He said, we're not an early game team. We just play the early game better than everyone else. I believe him.
Yeah, right?
I believe him.
I think they decide what phase of the game dash team they want to be on any given game, and this one the Dragons decided they wanted to be an early game team. And the Bolts learned the hard way. The Bolts have got to win 2 straight to come back in this set. The Jade Dragons run that one back. We got a quick set here to round out the week. We'll see how game number 2 goes in this set right after this break.
fans, Aggro here. Look, every single year, the SPL just keeps getting better. Season 7 was incredible, and in Season 8, I'm sure our players are going to take their game to the next level. But in order to do that, they're going to need the best gear they can get their hands on. And that's why I'm so excited to announce the title sponsor for Season 8 of the SPL is Alienware. Yeah, that Alienware. Our players are getting the best of the best in computer gaming. These Alienware Aurora Ryzen Edition PC setups are insane. Not only will these be the PCs that the players will compete on once we are in studio, but Alienware is also providing one for each player at their home setup to make sure their practice is as good as possible. Now let's get down to brass tacks. The specs on these Alienware Aurora Ryzen Edition desktops are amazing. An AMD Ryzen 9 16-core processor.
That's a lot of cores.
That's plenty of processing power.
That's a lot of plenty of cores.
If you want to stream, this is the way to go.
I know a lot about my cores, so. I mean, Pilates, right?
64 gigabytes of DDR4 RAM.
What? Is that true?
That is true.
I mean, this thing has 64 gigs of DDR4 RAM.
Which you can do literally anything with.
Literally anything.
I've never had more than 16 gigs.
That's quadruple the amount I have at home.
And one of the hottest commodities in the PC world, an NVIDIA GeForce 3090 graphics card.
Insane how much better this is than what I have.
The best graphics you really need, Ultra, of course.
Content's gonna look good.
And what's the point of all the power if you can't see it? Players will also be using the Alienware 25-inch 240 Hz monitors.
Man, when I load into scrims with this bad boy, I'm gonna feed so hard. And it's gonna be in perfect picture quality.
We are so excited to be partnering with Alienware for Season 8 of the SMITE Pro League. And the best part is, this VIP treatment, it's not just for the pros. You too can get the best possible SMITE experience. Just go to smitegame.com/Alienware and use code SMITEAW to get special discounts on some of Alienware's best products. Thanks again to Alienware. Make sure you're following them on Twitter and Instagram. That's at Alienware on both platforms. And you can join their community at alienwarearena.com.
And you're telling me an alien wore this?
Hello, SMITE fans, and welcome back to the SMITE Pro League powered by Alienware. For anybody that might have just missed any of the little promotional segments that just took place in that nice little video that Aggro so kindly created for us alongside the help of production, you too can have all of the professional gaming needs your heart could ever desire for both your gaming pleasure as well as your at-home viewing pleasure for the SPL. If you head on over to smitegame.com/Alienware, make sure to plug code SMITEAW, and that's not all that you can get out of Alienware. Alienware does have giveaways from time to time, so you want to make sure you stay up to date with them by following them at Alienware on Instagram and Twitter. And you can also join their global community over at alienwarearena.com and stay up to date with everything and all their promotional offers that they have alongside of that SMITEAW code. So one more time, smitegame.com/Alienware, and that's where you'll find everything that you need for what an alien wore, as Mike so kindly told us. But with the mention of Mike, can't help but mention this Jade Dragon's performance here in game number 1, Gore. It just looked dominant.
Pretty good, right? I mean, that's the way I'd describe it. They come in and they just look insane. First Blood is actually maybe the best competitive moment of this game, because it seems like Barra, he's one hit away, that new rock formation in the duo lane, just enough to save Mike as he walks out of there, and then they turn that fight around. The healing comes through, the Emoja portion comes through, and all of a sudden they start picking up First Blood. First Blood goes their way, okay, well maybe that's not the end of the world, and this is actually where it is. Mike gets just out of dodge on that one auto that would have killed him, and is able to help turn this kill around immediately because they sandwich in the bolts. And this indicates that this is going to be a 50-minute game to me. Everything's going to be back and forth even. But then they came back to the duo lane, Taco. And then they came back to the duo lane again. And then, you know what? They did it again just for good measure. And Barra just didn't get to play the game.
No, that double whammy at the start for Barracuda just kind of set a little bit of foreshadowing maybe for the bolts as to what was going to actually be taking place here. Hurrywind as well on the Giannis. Every single opportunity that we thought Bear was going to get a chance to farm just completely taken away from him. The Jade Dragons were absolutely relentless with this duo side pressure. They completely abused some of the early woes that Xbalanque can experience in terms of laning phase pressure, and it all starts with Mike and Pandacat just making an excellent heads-up play to begin the game.
It was 15 minutes before we had a highlight reel from anything that didn't start around a purple buff or in the duo lane itself. And then no matter what, you end up jumping back to pretty much the exact same spot. They just played this so well on the Dragons. And again, they got themselves to an early lead, led to even more of a lead. I think at one point Dave and Mifflin had highlighted it saying like, okay, we're going to invade your red buff. You're going to defend red? Cool, we're going to Gold Fury. Like, you've got to make a decision here, and none of them are good decisions. If you step up to the Gold Fury, we'll either kill you or go steal the red. Like, no matter where you are, things are going to be unfortunate for you. And then the Bolts, when they finally had a little bit going in their favor, the Dragons woke up and strip away the objective they're trying to take, and they just took everything from them when they had the opportunity.
And that really was all that you need to know about game number 1 here for anybody that might have missed it. But the Bolts still have bounce back opportunity. This is a 3-game set potentially if the Bolts are able to find their victory in game number 2 here. But Gore, I think one thing that I have to highlight is the fact that there just wasn't enough pressure, I think, from the side lanes.
Yeah.
Neither Haddix could really establish a point of dominance with the Sobek, and it's not that they are horrible players by any means, it's more so just the composition didn't really do the Bolts much favor, so once they found themselves falling behind in that duo lane, the game was just so exponentially blown wide open by the Dragons because that's what the Dragons had drafted for. They used everyone's taxi service as often as possible with that through space and time to just cover all the ground on that map, and they did not leave any sort of kind of farm opportunities for the Olympus Bolts to capitalize on.
It kind of feels like they played into what the Dragons wanted, right? Where it's like, okay, our game plan, we're going to sit on the duo lane, we're going to make Barra and Jake just have just hell. Their game is going to be hell. And then you get, like you said, Haddix over there on Sobek of all things. Like, Haddix on King Arthur, Haddix on a Cucullin, Haddix on a Warrior. That's a threat that's still going to be able to come in and rotate to these objectives and cause some trouble. Haddix on a Sobek? What's he going to do? Pluck me? Okay, cool, now I'm in a better spot. I think that really ended up helping out the Dragons a little bit more, having a Guardian of all things over there, because the setup, there was no one to follow up for what Haddix had.
It was great front line from the Bolts, for sure. When you have a Sobek and a Fafnir, always, I think, heads-up opportunities to try and have a strong team fight behind you. But when your carries just get sat on, as hard as the Jade Dragon sat on top of Barracuda, really wasn't anything left for Veneno to do. And the whole team is so far behind in experience, there just isn't really much of an opportunity for that Soul to try and step up and make a difference because Jade Dragons are just too far out in front. Stellar Burst, Supernova, not going to actually be able to combine for a lot of that early game or mid-game even pressure that we oftentimes have seen. But it's going to be the Emoja taken first here by the Bolts. A different little switch up here compared to game 1. But Gore, so far what you're seeing in the picks and bans, do you like it?
I mean, I like the Emoja, but now I'm worried about like a Giannis Ymir pickup. Like you grab the Giannis again for Heroin, worked out really well last time around, and then you grab another great support for PBM to be able to play. He's going to go for the Fafnir. Either one is going to be aggressive and really open up the door for the Dragons. And I'm a little worried because even with the Emoja, even with all the things that are available, I mean, this is where they went Serket Fafnir last time, being able to swap that maybe Serket Soul since those were in their top 3. I just don't know that that's the route I'd want to go if I'm the Bolts here. I think I need to change up most of my strategy to deal with this Giannis first, then maybe to give a little bit of help towards Barra in the duo lane.
Anything you can do, I can do better seems to be what these two teams are taking away from each other. It looks like mild swaps across the board. You've got Emoja and Erlong Shen now for the Bolts as opposed to the Jade Dragons who took that Fafnir away from Awesome Jake in response to losing the Emoja. But again, I think this all definitely plays back into that original topic that we touched on for the Descore, and that's that these two teams have a ton of similarities in terms of their drafting preferences.
And this, I mean, follows that perfectly, right? Odin has been something that Finoke has played and that the Bolts have played. The Bolts love to go with it with the Morrigan, have the double cage. But Finoke just likes to have this pick, and I think it's going to be a little bit of a bully here. I mean, you already have something that's going to start shutting down the Yamoja healing, the Soul healing, and the Erlong Shen healing if you can get them in the cage. But on top of that, I mean, Soul, yes, technically should be able to help beat down one wall fast, but I still feel like it's going to be pretty oppressive. You add Barra into the mix, maybe late game team fights, you're not looking at the cage, but then you start factoring in the shield, the Raven shout, the jump, the stun that Odin's bringing. I don't know, I like Finoke's pick here.
Definitely still a little bit of jungle focus coming out of the Bolts here, as well as Mercury and a Wheelish will join the other bands that the Bolts have opted for so far. Raven, Daji, Bolt still available here, though, for Sam if he wants to try and continue feeding into this team fight engagement presence, but it's actually going to be the Humbats. How could I forget about the Humbats? The Fear No Evil coincides perfectly, I think, with that Odin cage on top of the Fafnir. The Chronic form covers a lot of AoE, and it's definitely just pressure for the Bolts to try and play into because there's so much counter engage with that Fear No Evil alone.
I think the matchup between Bara and Panda Cat here, like everything else I can see going toe for toe as of right now, but that final lock-in is really what I'm going to hinge the Dragons. Like, Panda Cat, he can play so much, so well, but what he locks in, if he's going to be able to control it, we've seen Sam's Hunbats, it's insane. We've seen Final K's Odin. It's something that's difficult to deal with. Same thing for the Giannis and the Fafnir. And if they can lock it in with like just a 5th pick that just feels too oppressive for the Bolts, I think it might be a little bit of a longer game. I don't know that the Bolts are going to let them have as much free reign, but it's not going to be an easy matchup by any means. The Bolts are going to have to work really hard for this one.
Yeah, the other thing to note as well is the fact that with this King Arthur being locked in for presumably Haddix and the Rom, the Bolts don't seem to really be all that intimidated right now, Gore, of that Odin cage. Rom, granted, can escape for a short period of time when he's up in that Astral Barrage. However, Rom, at the end of the day, still relatively susceptible to getting punished inside of that Odin cage.
Now, I'm going to say, if this does get locked in, I feel like Panda Cat is just like sitting down, or maybe it's Kabam. Maybe I need to give the credit a little higher up. That's looking at like, okay, let's look at Season 7. Let's look at Season 6, Season 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Let's look at every Hunter matchup that has existed in Smite, because there was that triangle a few years ago of like, oh man, Artemis will beat X-Ball, who will beat, or no, Artemis will beat Cupid, who will beat X-Ball, who will beat Artemis, and that was like the weird triangle we had for a while. And Rom and AMC, I don't know how many years ago it was off the top of my head, but that used to be like the duo lane you always got to see. It'd be fun if it got locked in, but Uller matches up just as well.
Almost and Cobb would have definitely been fun if he'd had a chance to make his debut here in Split 2 for Season 8.
For Season 8.
Yes, but
caveat.
The Uller, I think that this pairs nicely with the rest of the Jade Dragons because they have so much of that early game pressure as is. I think the weakest point of their early game aspect would probably be stemming from that mid lane off the Giannis, but when you have so much pressure drafted in those side lanes alone, I'd imagine it to be relatively difficult for the Bolts to actually try and get the ball rolling here, given the fact that Rom, Yamoja, definitely a force to be reckoned with if you're not careful. I have to remember those Astral Arrows deal a decent chunk of damage, especially when you stack it on top of all the slows provided by the Yamoja. It's more so, Gore, the concern. How effectively do you think the Bolts are going to actually be able to engage in these team fights, knowing that that Odin and that through space and time could be such heavy separation factors?
Man, we saw the through space and time Bara passive, like him being just a magnetic pull for that ult, it feels like, last time around. Maybe that's going to end up being unfortunate a few times. I think that's definitely a concept, but Odin can eat this team alive if he gets to the late game happy, and Fine OK knows how to position himself. I mean, Erlong's going to be safe, and that's it, right? Everybody else is going to need a Phantom or some sort of assistance. The healing already, again, I mentioned that earlier, but he has to be taken out of the equation. So like Rom, King Arthur, Soul, Yamoja, like they're not going to be able to rely on the healers they have or any self-sustain they have here. It's going to come down to Phantom, and I guess Soul and Rom being able to knock a cage wall down, get out of there pretty quickly. Like they have escapes for it, but otherwise Fine OK is just going to be able to eat them up.
River's Rebuke inside. Or just put it on the sides.
Put the walls inside your walls.
So we'll have walls.
We'll cage your cage, man.
For, in case any of that collapse tries to come through the Jade Dragons. But this is a really strong collapse composition, though, from the Jade Dragons, whether it's stemming from that through space and time or off the Fear No Evil and that Odin cage. This is certainly an incredibly strong composition for the Jade Dragons to work with. Honestly, really curious to see how, though, the objective pressure goes with Erlong, Soul, and Rom, because I think this is a great opportunity for Rom to possibly look for a crit-oriented build and that could put a damper on the Jade Dragon's mood if Bear is actually able to get the ball rolling with this hyper carry ROM.
Yeah, I'm excited to see, I think, just everything that this Bolts draft has to offer, because there's a lot of merits to it. While there's a lot of stuff that the Dragons can do to shut it down, it has a lot of strengths in it, and the ROM is maybe the biggest one that could really turn the tides.
Well, Jade Dragons, they're looking to see if they can be the first team to put the Olympus Bolts with a lost set for this secondary split, and we've got Dulcet and Mifflin to bring you guys all the in-game action.
We've had a very brief moment to catch our breath after what happened there in game number 1. Jade Dragons take game 1 in about 20 minutes. The Olympus Bolts, a chance to bounce back. That feels like an outlier type of game. Not so much for the Dragons, because that's what they like to do, Miff, but it is not often you see the Bolts get rolled over like that.
No, and I think it all ties back to that first blood where it was PBM that looked like he was going to fall down. A great start for the Olympus Bolts. It immediately gets turned around into a kill, then a gank just a couple of moments later to turn into 3 for 0 at the 2-minute mark. I mean, those were thin margins. Had that not happened, I think the Olympus Bolts would have been able to hang in there a little bit longer. So I'm expecting the Bolts, with that in mind, to take this game at a little bit of a slower pace. Don't try and push the issue too much. Instead, play around that mid-game. And, well, their draft fits that incredibly well. If they're able to come to the point where they can start looking at a Gold Fury from even, I mean, the desk highlighted it briefly, this is a phenomenal objective burn composition, and I think that is the strategy for them.
We know what happens now. The Dragons go twice as fast that you said. You said maybe they'll slow it down. That means the Jade Dragons are just they're gonna say, all right, game 1 was slow compared to how we really want to play. Just kidding, that's not. There's no faster, I don't think, that you could go.
It was like an 18-minute game this year, right?
That's right. We could have gone 2 minutes faster. We'll see if the Jade Dragons are able to get it that fast. Haddock's on a bit of a different pick this time. King Arthur for himself there instead of the Sobek. We've seen plenty of examples of why Sobek, why Guardians in the solo lane can work. But I think this is a good chance for Haddock's to really show his strong suit. It's the aggressive, in-your-face, run-you-down type of play style, and I think the King Arthur fits that well.
Yeah, last game we had Haddox, this game we get Chaddix, and hopefully he lives up to that moniker, and I think he certainly can on this King Arthur pick. Bandit Cat, though, putting a ton of damage into Barracuda. I mean, Transcendence Bluestone start, yeah, you're going to be swinging for the fences with your abilities. Barracuda, though, is at least going to be able to rely on the 408 for some healing in this lane.
What do we think here, Miff? PBM goes for the Horrific Emblem as his starter item here. It's often, I'll hold that thought, as Lasber's around the backside of PBM and Panda Cat here. Stun, good onto Panda. Trying to read out the jump is Lasbro. Lasbro's not going to get the pin onto anyone, and the stun and the emblem on the backside, and somehow it's Lasbro that looks worse for wear, and the Jade Dragons attempting maybe a 2v3 here in the duo lane. If you tell me Lasbro's attempting a level 2, level 3 gank, and he ends up walking away as the least healthy member of all 5 that are in that duo lane, I think you're kidding, but the Jade Dragons played that one perfectly.
Especially considering back in Season 7, Lasbro was the best cringe ganker we ever had. That's not really the right way to call it nowadays. It's a little bit more nuanced than all that, but how that does pan out means that the Jade Dragons are going to have to slow down their pace a little bit here in the long lane. They lose out on the Horrific, which is a lot of their kill potential, so Lazarus sacrifices some of his farm to just help out Barracuda.
Jake still does eat a stun here as Panda Cat and PBM will walk away. It's that chain CC that I think you got to be careful here if you're Barracuda or Awesome Jake. Both still have their beads, so one instance of the chain CC you'll be able to walk away from, but if it happens on a consistent basis, that's when you can start to see some kills getting set up between this Uller and the Fafnir as well. So pressure is there. We'll see if the purple buffs start to get invaded here. Jake walks forward to try to steal it away, and it actually looks like Jake was able to do so, unless Panda Cat ends up going back at some point to pick it up. So small win here for the Olympus Bolts. And we talk so much about how things kind of snowballed out of control there in game 1 over here in the duo lane. So feeling a little bit more comfortable, getting Jake back on this Yamoja, give Barracuda something that can be safe in this ROM. I think a good pivot here for the Bolts in game 2.
It is, and the Jade Dragons already doing a great job controlling these neutrals, is what I say as the Olympus Bolts pick up one for themselves. But Hurrywin was able to secure those right side Harpies and keep up that farm a little bit. I'm waiting for this level 5 point once we start to see these solo or supports rather rotate out of the lane, start to see these 3v3s roll through, or maybe just Sam for Soccer does it now.
Yeah, Sam is here with the Fear No Evil. Beads used by Barracuda. Awesome Jake is not going to have the same chance. It's a rip tied away, but Sam for Soccer there on the follow-up. The leap not read properly, but Hurrywin from the mid lane hits the through space in time, and now the Giannis of all people on the board. Now it's 3 assists, 1 for Sam for Soccer, PBM and Panda Cat, and then a kill on over to Hurrywin. So the Giannis gets that first blood bounty.
Scumbag Hurrywin KS, all right? That's all that was. It wasn't needed, but it was certainly stylish. Such a long-range ultimate. But now Sanford Soccer in a little bit of trouble, tries to confirm those oracles. Lasbra able to force him back there, and Hurrywin picking up first blood feels pretty good. Seems like he's found a build that he really does like with his Pythags piece in the first slot. I would consider it unorthodox, but we've seen how Hurrywin's been building recently. Can't really argue with the stat line that item brings. And having first blood, he said it yesterday, you're going to love my builds when I'm ahead. And, well, first blood's a great start for it.
It is a great start. Pythags piece yet again for Hurrywin. Seemed to work out. Now the Olympus Bolts, they don't want to cede all pressure here in this early game. Lasbra will not get the taunt in because beads were used. Now Sanford Soccer in on the follow-up. Fear no evil. Still 50% of the way there. Jake looks like he's going to sacrifice himself a bit. Here's the Riptide goes away, but Lasbra is stuck around. Polar Bear Mike gets the first. Hurrywin gets the second. And the Jade Dragons, yeah, it's slower, but they're still off to a great start.
I wonder why Jake decides to stick around inside of that. Once you drop that ultimate, you can walk through your own walls. You can get out of there, but instead, you said it looks like he was trying to sacrifice himself, and he does so, but it doesn't really get too much out alive. Meanwhile, on the right-hand side, ultimate trade from the Soul Laners, but I don't want to talk about these Soul Laners, man. It's two warriors that are going to be hitting each other for a while.
Let's discuss the nuances, the ins and outs, the micro play of that Soul Lane.
Yeah.
So Totem of Coup under control by Fine-OK. 3-0 here in this lane. Looks like the Odin Mifflin maybe has a little bit more pressure than what the King Arthur's been able to provide. Do you imagine that continues going into the mid-game here?
No, not at all. King Arthur just has more abilities and is likely going to go for a little bit more scaling in his items. We're really doing this. We're really going to talk about the Soul Lane right now.
I got you there.
You got me. I mean, that is something worth bringing up. I do expect to see Fine-OK actually start to rotate very soon. Wants to start to utilize that ultimate before the Olympus Bolts are allowed to pick up Phantom, and you can see that reflected in his relic selection. It's Blink early on. Yep. Not worried about his own survivability. Instead, wants to be that engage factor for his team.
Yeah, we've seen Odin's absolutely disrupt matchups. The Olympus Bolt's kind of the first to do it. They get Morgan and Odin here in Phase 2 on a couple of occasions, and opposing teams had a very difficult time dealing with it. Red buff taken down, halfway back to respawn here for the Olympus Bolts. Purple buff's not up just yet. So the Bolts found an early purple buff invade, and it wasn't even so much an invade, it was Jake walking forward and stealing that one away. But both teams seemingly happy, Miff, with taking a bit of a deep breath here. Do you imagine we see pressure on this next round of buffs from either side?
I wouldn't be overly surprised if we see the Jade Dragons try and return it. They do have the timer on both red buffs right now. Olympus Bolts likely do not have the timer on their own, as the Jade Dragons were able to strip it away with nobody there. I'm pretty excited to see how this one rolls out. Keep your eyes on Sanford Soccer and on Lasbra. They're likely going to be the ones who indicate who's feeling more confident inside of this fight, but even just taking a positioning peek at the map right now, it's Jade Dragons deep in the Bolts jungle.
Wow, and Haddix, we've mentioned aggressive builds. Sovereignty, Miff, unless I'm completely incorrect on this, I'll hold this thought as a red buff invade attempted here. Venenu eats the axe and red buff drop down, and Venenu secures this one. Haddix goes and gets his own blue buff, and it looks like Barracuda is going to get his own purple buff. You got to be careful, though, here, because this Gold Fury is up, and we've talked about the shred potential later on in the game from this Bolts team, so they might look for something like that. Skirmish happening in the mid lane. Also over here on the right-hand side, Awesome Jake has his ultimate. Venenu attempting to follow up on a stun that was never there from Awesome Jake, and the portal's out to safety. Good enough.
Yeah, it does get them their own red buff here, and that was a semi-invade attempt we saw from the Jade Dragons onto the red buff. They were posturing around it, but Sanford Soccer, being on the right-hand side of the map, clearing out those back camps as well as the mid camps, means that he really can't follow up, so the Jade Dragons don't overcommit there. They allow the Olympus Bolts to take it, but it was a 4-split on that red. Not very efficient farm, which again, just that threat that the Jade Dragons generate by standing near the buff is slowly hurting the Bolts. I
will peel back to the earlier point before some of the somewhat invade started happening there. Haddix goes Sovereignty, first item here, Mifflin. You got an Odin, you've got a Hunbats, you've got an Uller. I guess there's enough burst physical damage in that trio to maybe want to help out the rest of your team.
Yeah, it seems like it. And he doesn't really have to fight PBM or Hurrywin too early on. He's more so concerned about ganks coming his way or maybe these team fights around the objectives. So I do agree with the itemization path. 408, though, caught out a little bit here. PBM on the chase.
Hurrywind is there as well. It's a stun over onto Awesome Jake. Rivers Rebuke catches out 3. Lasbra catches out 2. He's there on the follow-up, but there needs to be more damage. The Bolts have all this setup. but the damage hasn't found its way in just yet. Instead, Lasbra deleted. Vanenu returns the favor, though. Barracuda, he joins the fray, and now Bandicat goes down. Here come the Snipes, looking for a couple more. 1 and 2 are good, 3 good as well. Vanenu has the double, and the Olympus Bolts, they buy their time, and they buy a fight.
Man, Haddix just beats out Final K on the rotation, and the fight completely turns around. Sanford Soccer was not able to rejoin the engagement after the Fear No Evil was already expended, so the Olympus Bolts surge forward, dive into the back line, shut down Panicat and Hurrywin, and get themselves the first neutral objective of this one. And despite that being such a huge swing for the Bolts, it still is a net neutral game here. We are looking at a dead even game state.
Now it's these next few moments that really turn things around, going into the Pyro, going in to the FG. Lasbra, no ultimate, makes his way on over towards the right, though. Sanford Soccer doesn't have his ultimate either. Got to figure no real fight to be won here. There's a blue buff up if the Olympus Bolts want to try to engage on that one. But the Bolts have never really felt on the back foot. They've kind of continued looking forward, sometimes looking for these red buffs. The Jade Dragons have done so as well. Haddix has to be careful here because PBM is rotating over, and Fine OK does a chunky little bit of damage with that crow jump. Fine OK could close the gap. Oh, pinch perfect on the sidestep there from Haddix. But he's going to turn around. He's going to get dove here beneath his Tier 1 tower, and it's Fine OK who grabs it.
That was a long chase from the Jade Dragons. That took a very long time. Got to think Lasbra could have likely used his own ultimate for a little bit of peel, but maybe steps up too far.
Wow, the turnaround. Lasbra, is going to get a bit of a heal here in a moment. There's a portal right on through. The heal comes in as PBM continues to waltz on forward. Watch out for the hammer stun on the backside. The slow is there onto Lasbra, and at this point it's just who. And Hurrywind is the who. 3-1 and 3 on the Giannis.
Jade Dragons, all right, well, if you guys want gold for you, we're just going to go to the opposite side of the map. Nothing to fight over there in the duo lane, and we'll put the pressure here. Solo tower very close to falling. Seems like the Dragons are going to leave it up to the minions, but minions can't do it all. You got to do it yourself, and they do finally strip that one away. But Olympus Bolts going for the Pyro?
Yeah, Bolts meaning Venenu, and then Jake kind of in behind, but that means Fine OK is going to have a rotation and disapparate. Gets the soul back to safety. The Jade Dragons now feeling confident enough to maybe pull this Pyromancer on their own, but Haddix, Jake, the frontliners of the Olympus Bolts close enough by, and so neither team will attempt it for the time being. Lasbra's had a tough game here in game number 2. 0-3 on the Erlong Shen, 2 levels behind Sanford Soccer, who's 105. He's got the Jotuns into the hi-rez there, Miff, and we've already seen big damage out of Sanford Soccer. Not all that high up on the damage charts, but when everyone is 500 to 600, oh, that's net worth, excuse me. I was like, wow, everyone's 500 to 600 away from one another. There you go. A little bit higher up there in that regard. Just about 1,000 beneath the highest Olympus Bolts player.
Yeah, he's more so concerned about that CDR once Fear No Evil available constantly, and Jotun's Wrath and Hydra is going to give you a good little burst in that department. Awesome Jake steps a little far forward. Thought maybe we'd see more of a commitment from the Dragons as Hurrywin and Sanford Soccer were nearby inside the jungle, but don't want to commit too much to the support here. Instead, going to go ahead and reset back to neutral. So we get a little bit of a roundup here. It seems like a more, again, emphasis on rotations from Fine OK, which is still being reflected in the build. Talisman of Energy for a little bit of additional movement speed, whereas Haddix wants to dive this backline, wants to be able to sit in there and disrupt this damage. Void Shield getting picked up should help him out insofar as survivability as well as his own damage output. Likely going to be targeting Pandacat inside of these fights.
This is something we've seen from Lasbra as well. You look towards this build. Mannequins early on, started right on the auto attack-centric junglers. Nothing too surprising there. Into the Stone Cutting Sword. And then the CC bubble, he loves picking up a second item in this build. You get a little offense to start off, and you get the Mag Eyes, second item. And we've seen big value out of that in different games from Lasbra. We'll hopefully find some value here in game number 2, because at 0-3, the Erlong Shen wishes that was online late, maybe a little bit sooner. You don't have the beads just yet, still a couple levels shy of that, if that's what Lasbra ends up needing. So at least you have pseudo beads here in the first 13 minutes.
And it's a great pickup considering all the single target CC, but Fine OK does find the cage on a Haddix, but maybe not the best target. Instead, decides to chase out Jake.
Awesome Jake is low here, but he's going to be able to sustain up just a little bit. Fine OK jumps on away, Haddix in on the chase.
Sam.
Hurrywin could let some damage flow through, but instead it's Awesome Jake onto Sanford Soccer, who gets the Fear No Evil off. That sends Fine OK back, running away. Lasbra eats the through space in time from Hurrywin here, so the Erlong Shen just shy of becoming 0-4 here. Pyromancer started up by the Olympus Bolts.
And it's burning away quickly. The desk brought it up how great their objective burn is, and Yeah, it's already gone. Haddock's playing goaltender, making sure the Jade Dragons can't step too far forward. But Panda Cat, ever the optimist, always the one to find some sort of opportunities on the map, is able to strip away the red buff while that all is going on.
So Venenu, earlier on, a little bit lower than he currently is on the player damage charts, but he's kept some of that burst damage on the rise here, 2-0-2, keeping even with Hurrywind. Very important now in this game. Doesn't do all that much to Panda Cat just yet, but able to sustain himself up through the burst of damage that Panda was providing. I was surprised, admittedly, Miff, if you look on the other side of the mid lane, that Hurrywind was able to get this Giannis in back-to-back games. I don't think it was game over because of Hurrywind's Giannis in game one, but certainly felt like a big piece of the puzzle there. And so maybe the Olympus Bolts feeling like they've got a better game plan around it here in game two.
Well, so far they haven't done a great job of limiting him. He's sitting at the top of the damage charts, 3-1-3, participating in 100% of the kills here for the Jade Dragons. I think Hurrywind's doing a good job reminding everybody why this god has been banned in the past against him just about 100% of the time until a couple of weeks ago. So maybe just kind of give everybody a little bit of a reminder. Say maybe toss some bans this way again.
Olympus Bolts start up the Primal Fury, but start up is a bit aggressive there because it's just a little bit of damage that finds its way in. Polar Bear Mike close enough. That means the Jade Dragons will close this gap a little bit. They already had the Oracle, so they knew what was going on. And the Olympus Bolts seemingly okay with the pace here at the moment. They are not far behind, if behind at all in gold. Call it 100 gold is what separates these two teams. Kills can be kind of looked over now at this point. And experience is very close as well. You said we were even, what was that, 3-4 minutes ago maybe? We're still dead even here 15 minutes into the game. And that's when you have to worry about some of these late-game scaling picks that could make a difference.
And I think if anyone should be worried, it's the Jade Dragons fans at home. This Olympus Bolts draft scales very well into the late game. I mean, Barracuda could start to shift up his build towards a little bit of crit, but already going for that Silver Branch build. That is a ton of power with the attack speed stem that Rom has. Could even pop that attack speed stem, go up into the ultimate, and utilize that additional power for ranged burst damage. And then you've also got Ven, who scales incredibly well. Lasbra starting to get some damage output inside of his build as well. It's going to be a tough one for the Jade Dragons to go into if this does continue at this pace.
Have to imagine this next Fury fight then is going to be very indicative of how the next 5-10 minutes might go if it is won cleanly by one side or the other. Awesome Jake finds himself towards the bottom of the player damage charts, as you'd expect. He's a support player, but loves the Deso on a pick like this, and he's picked it up after the Gauntlet of Thebes. So, conditional cooldown reduction, a little bit of power as well, and maybe Myth, if some of those damaging abilities, the stuns, things like that, start to connect onto the back line, maybe that little bit of extra damage helps set up for your team.
If there's one thing you want to connect onto the back line here from the Olympus Bolts, it's the Erlang Shen. Lasbra, sitting at the dead last in the damage charts, has not quite been able to close gap and deal consistent damage with his auto attacks. It's one of the byproducts of falling behind on Erlang Shen as the Olympus Bolts pull the Primal Fury, reset.
Wow.
Too many people from the Jade Dragons around.
Haddock uses his beads here. That's a tough loss if the Olympus Bolts end up aggressing on this fight. Instead, Final K jumps in. He's got two in the cage through space and time over onto Barracuda, but he's able to get up into the sky, send some snipes on downwards, and he'll crash down into the River's Rebuke. So Barracuda is safe for the time being, but it looks like the Bolts, they're regathering themselves to push on in as the Jade Dragons elect to leave.
Panda Cat, so low HP, cannot stick around much longer and does not have any lifesteal inside of the build. Has to rely on that lifesteal from his passive inside the Axe stance, whereas the Olympus Bolts have a ton of sustain inside of their team. Lazarus Ultimate Soul.
Healthy.
I mean, Barracuda's feeling just fine. All that healing from Umoja. Yeah, it's still ringing through. Couldn't even tell me the Olympus Bolts were in a fight just a moment ago. They are healthy.
4 ultimates down for the Olympus Bolts. It's only Haddock who has his on the other side. Fear No Evil is there. That's a big one. Big engage tool for the Jade Dragons, ready to go. 4 sets of beads, though, for the Olympus Bolts could make the difference. PBM walks on in towards the Primal Fury here. Sam for Soccer over the Fury wall, looking for that impactful Fear No Evil that hasn't found its way in just yet. He's got 3 sets of beads, and Sam for Soccer with a big engage. And now the Olympus Bolts, they back their way away just a little bit, but Barracuda wailing away on the Final K. Now Haddock throws out the last ultimate available in this team fight, and Barracuda whittles down that health bar. It's another one for the Olympus Bolts as the Jade Dragon scattering in the wind. Haddock gets the double, and Polar Bear Mike will fall soon.
Olympus Bolts just have way too much healing. PBM extends his life a little bit by getting over the wall, but maybe just gets out alive completely here. The Olympus Bolts have so much time to work with, so much sustain. It's only Jake that's low HP. Makes sense to see where they're starting to walk over towards. It's that Fire Giant that they're looking at. Thought maybe we'd see him go towards Hurrywin if he steps forward, but instead, more so on the objective, and it's going to burn quickly 18 minutes into this one.
Here we go. Hurrywin halfway to that through space and time. Haddix is going to do just fine in getting this backliner out of the fray. Polar Bear Mike is going to walk on in, try to close this gap. River's Rebuke used by Awesome Jake. Awesome Jake could go down here. Olympus Bolts secure the FG. The timing there was scary, but the Bolts get the Fire Giant nonetheless. PBM now will fall down. See, I knew it was going to happen eventually, and Polar Bear Mike goes down, and the Olympus Bolts get the biggest lead of the game.
I can't argue with the decision-making from Mike there. He realizes, look, best case scenario, I steal Fire Giant. That's pretty good. Worst case scenario, I'm dead for 20 seconds. He's gonna respawn before the Olympus Bolts group up on any of his towers. So it's not really that much of a opportunity cost for him there to go ahead and try it out. But now the Olympus Bolts with Fire Giant on 5 members and a great siege composition. We were talking about their neutral objective burn. Well, that applies to these permanent objectives as well. They are going to shred these towers given any opportunity. If Barracuda or Ven or even just Lazarus is there, well, these towers won't be long for this world. Jade Dragons, though, do have a pretty decent defensive composition. Final K can control space just like a Yamoja can with his ultimate. His Sanford Soccer, we've seen what he can do with the Fear No Evil, burning 3 beads inside of that last engagement. Well, those beads are still down for the next 30 to 40 seconds, so if they're lucky, the Jade Dragons, that is, maybe Sanford Soccer can do that one yet again. And, well, there still is some pretty decent burst potential from Yanis.
There's something satisfying, I think. All 3 of the beads down Venenu, Awesome Jake, and Barracuda.
It's perfect.
Timing in sync completely. Every single second counting down at the same time. Had to be something that the Bolts were aware of. If we're going to commit onto this Fury, Sanford Soccer still has his ultimate. We're going to have to be ready on the beads. And ready they were. And it was that second wind, the regrouping, and the push back in from the Bolts that really made a difference. 6 towers remaining on the map becomes only 3 towers remaining on the map. Left side Phoenix open. Mid lane has 1 tier 2 remaining.
Mike does hit a very good power spike here, taking over to level 12, is finally able to get an Ankh for his team, so could help out a little bit with this healing we're starting to see from the Olympus Bolts, as well as help out the Jade Dragons with that initial spearhead inside the team fight. They need to win that team fight off the initial engagement, because if the Olympus Bolts are allowed to walk away, we've seen how quickly they heal back up.
Wow, the Jade Dragons putting up a fight around this tier 2 tower. The Riptide does nothing here. Finally, the wall gets broken, and the second Riptide does something, and that's Awesome Jake getting out alive. Hurrywind sends the through space and time right on over towards the mid lane, but that's not going to be there for any sort of damage, just repositioning. Venenu stunned in on the backline. Fear No Evil catches out to a couple members of the Olympus Bolts, but all those beads used in sync yet again, and the Olympus Bolts are able to turn this one around. Poor Bear Mike, he's going to transform here, but he's still caught out by a couple members of the Olympus Bolts. Tier 2 tower dies in the mid lane. Be careful, Haddix. The Phoenix is swinging.
My heart goes out to Sanford Soccer. Blinks in twice this game and burns 3 beads. 4 sets of beads this time around. Absolutely correct, Dave. That is tough. I mean, if I'm in those comms, like, guys, burn like 1 beat so I could do something, please, because I'm doing it all right now. But there's not enough consistent CC on the side of the Jade Dragons. It really is just up to Sam.
That's true. It's fine, okay, hitting a stun, PBM or Panda Cat hitting these individual stuns on the portal. It's a lot of single target CC on the backside. Speaking of that, Panda Cat gets stunned down by Haddix as the left side Phoenix gets siege. Final K's got 3 in the cage, but the Olympus Bolts, they want to be there and they want to work forward. Final K jumps on away. It's a great portal from Hurrywind here to slow down the engage from the Olympus Bolts, and it looks like the Jade Dragons are going to get back to Fountain, heal things up through space and time. Doesn't do much.
Haddix thought maybe he can catch out Hurrywin on that teleport in, but does not have the CC available to him. Instead, Olympus Bolts going to be able to walk away from this one pretty easily. Still got a minute left on that Fire Giant power play, so going to strip away as much of the jungle as possible. Got tons of gold in the pocket as well, so makes sense to me that they don't want to go ahead and continue pushing. Instead, head back to base, spend all that well-earned gold, and then regroup again and try and close it out.
What a difference a pick makes here for Barracuda, huh? It feels like this ROM has been dove on in the backline at the same rate that it was in game number 1. But Barra, a couple of times even around this Fury, has just gone up into the air, sniped on down, kept himself in these fights. That self-peel where you can just remove yourself from a team fight for a little while has worked wonders.
And that particular facet of ROM has actually been nerfed pretty heavily. The ability to go up into the air, cancel the ultimate, and then immediately roll out isn't quite there anymore. You gotta wait a couple of microseconds, maybe about half a second before you're allowed to use that rollout from the ultimate state. So Barracuda has to be very choosy with how he uses that ultimate. Instead of having it be kind of a mix-up on when you're going to land, it's just, all right, I'm Aegis for a little bit. I'm up in the air. You can't hit me, and I can hit you. When I land, please don't hurt me.
Yeah, and then Jake, I think on a couple instances, has done well on either riptiding or Rivers rebuking or having that healing ready for Barracuda the moment that he comes down from the sky. So the communication, that's what I meant by an outlier game. The Olympus Bolts get absolutely decimated in Game 1, and that's not indicative of the team that we've seen here in Phase 2. The Jade Dragons, though, absolutely the type of team that give themselves that opportunity. So less indicative of the Bolts, I guess is what I'm really trying to get at here. Tier 1 tower on the right-hand side finally goes down. 1 tower left on the map for the Jade Dragons, while the Olympus Bolts have 4. Fire Giant about to respawn here, Mifflin, but left side Phoenix is down. That means somebody from the Jade Dragons, not immediately. The waves will crash. Hell, dead center of the wave, or lane, excuse me, there on the left-hand side of the map. Could provide some pressure here in a little bit, though, as those fire minion waves build up.
All the Olympus Bolts have to do, if they want to utilize that fire minion wave, is do what they've already been wanting to do, which is extend this team fight as long as possible. Doesn't seem like that's going to be the case here, as Fire Giant is burning quickly. PBM and Final K on the defense. Lazra adding his goaltender for Hurrywind.
Lazra used his ultimate, but Hurrywind used his beads. That's important to look at here. Olympus Bolts have all 5 sets of beads ready to go. 4 of them were in sync with one another.
Yeah, get them, Sam.
And so the Olympus Bolts delayed out enough to have all those beads back and ready to go. Barracuda 25 seconds away from the Aegis. That's going to be big here. When you're a ROM, you land back down from the sky. You could still be in a threat, as Mifflin has already discussed here, whereas Hurrywind already mentioned no beads for the next 135 seconds or so. So if somebody from the Bolts finds that backline, Miff, could be tough to deal with.
Sam for Soccer forced to head back to base to contend with this fire minion wave, and the Olympus Bolts have been doing a good job of just generating threat on the map, forcing the Jade Dragons to stick around. Hurrywind
does
rotate. Yeah, so he can ult over. He's got that global presence.
Yeah, Sam for Soccer's there. Could engage in on this fight if need be. The Olympus Bolts know that Hurrywind's not here, and that's why they walk forward, but immediately walking away are the rest of the Jade Dragons. All you need is the 1-2 punch of Venenu and Barracuda on the Fire Giant, as it's now 50%? Reached half HP just because of the carries here. The Jade Dragon starting to regroup. They'll watch out for the through space and time. Final K has initiated onto Venenu, in onto the back, but the Disapparate buys him some time. Through space and time goes right through the uprights, and the Olympus Bolts are able to stave off that damage. Polar Bear Mike now left alone, taunted back in by Lazra, and then transforms to avoid the stun from Awesome Jake, but there's a Rivers Rebuke that spells death for the Fafnir.
Great cripple from Haddix. You can't jump out, and instead gets clapped by the river. Sanford Soccer on the edge there.
Never got to use his ult.
To start to run away. That is a tough one. I mean, Hurrywin was, what, maybe 2 pixels away from completely removing Ven from the game there. That's what we're talking about with this Yanis pick. If he's just a little bit more on the mark with that ultimate, that is a team fight that likely would have gone the way of the Jade Dragons. Instead, though, it's the Olympus Bolts dragging an engagement out over the course of almost an entire minute and a half, while these fireman waves work down the left side to finally find that one opportunity to win the team fight, take the objective, get Fire Giant on 5 members, and start this siege up yet again.
Save for Soccer never used his ult. Nobody on the Olympus Bolts had to use their beads.
Good call
Seems to be a bit of an indicator there in this one. Jade Dragon's going to look towards the Primal Fury. They're just going to take that one off the map, not allow the Olympus Bolts to get that extra gold, extra damage in their back pockets as well. Final K will strip away the purple buff here, so you start to look towards Phoenix defense. We already saw one from the Jade Dragons. Didn't look great at the time, admittedly, but now we're starting to catch up a little bit. Hurrywind's reached level 20, upgraded that starter item. Pandacat might have that a little bit later on, but he's got a Heartseeker. That's going to feel pretty good, but it feels like effectively everyone on the Jade Dragons, they all got that empty item slot there on the far right, so there's still a gold advantage that matters here going into this what could be final engagement.
And Dave, you legitimately hit the issue with this Jade Dragons draft on the head there. I mean, it's just Sam for Soccer
every once in a while,
who is burning those beads. It's just him. Legitimately, I would love someone in chat or someone at home to just say how many beads have been burnt by literally anyone that isn't Sam for Soccer this game. Because I would argue to say less than 5. It's just that threat of Fear No Evil that is forcing the Olympus Bolts to use their defensive relics. And if it's just that, well, I mean, he's only got it every, 50 seconds? You can't use it consistently on the defense.
Right, and if it gets used and the Olympus Bolts are able just to hit the beads and then turn around the fight anyway.
And that's what they're doing.
Doesn't matter, right? That's what happened around that Fury, and that's where this game really turned around. Fine, okay. Charges up the stun on the backside. Pops the bubble of Lazarus, so that feels pretty good, but Lazarus still has the beads. No life, though, on this left side Phoenix as the Olympus Bolts walk on in and take down the weakened Phoenix somewhat easily, I think. Tough, though. Lazarus uses the ultimate there. I don't see any beads down except for the ones respawning here from Panda Cat.
Hey, luckily Lazarus still got a Yamoja and a King Arthur to start burning beads for his team. It's going to be a little bit until he gets that ultimate available, a little bit for that survivability. But again, Lazarus not the reason that the Olympus Bolts are looking as good as they are right now.
No.
6,800 damage on the charts, getting dwarfed by the carries on his team.
He is full build, and a good 9 turns blessing could absolutely set up a big fight win here. Polar Bear Mike's going to have to transform into the back line. Goes Sam for Soccer, but nobody's there to fear. The evil is not feared at all because Sam for Soccer hasn't found anyone. 2 sets of beads are down. Haddix and Awesome Jake have had to use theirs, the frontliners. Instead, the Olympus Bolts go around the backside and in onto the Titan. They see a Game 3 around the corner, and a Game 3 we shall have. The Olympus Bolts take Game 2.
You know what, Dave? I said it yesterday. If the Dragons win Game 1, we're going to 3. Maybe I wrote the script this week, getting a little bit lucky on the predictions. Olympus Bolts look so good here in Game 2. Objective control, team fight control, a backline disruption. They had literally every part of it. It felt like the pace of every true 5-on-5 engagement was dictated by the Bolts. They said, we've got a great sustained draft. Play into us, and that's exactly what the Dragons did.
The second wins in those fights, it was Barracuda up in the sky, and then when he crashes down, making an impact. Awesome Jake helping everyone on the team out with some of that healing as the fights go on. The Olympus Bolts, they scratch and claw, that's the phrase, their way back into the set, and a Game 3 awaits right after this break.
Welcome back, Smite Pals, to the Smite Pro League powered by Alienware. And it's not just the Alienware peripherals that we've got our eyes set on. One more time, I want to remind you guys back at home who are watching, if you want to really show some heavy support for the league, you can head on over to shop.smiteproleague.com, cop yourself some of this primo Insight apparel. We've got hoodies, we've got jerseys, we've got the works for your ultimate viewing pleasure inside of that Insight apparel. Shop.smiteproleague.com. One more time, but Gore, getting back to it, Game 3, finally seeing a Game 3, feels like it's been forever, but what better way to bring this one home and wrap up this weekend of Week 3 Smite Pro League action than with the Olympus Bolts and the Jade Dragons.
And I mean, what a turnaround, right? Like, Game 1, the Dragons just rolled over the Bolts, and early on this game, it kind of felt like they were going to start to do the same thing. They really were getting off to, I want to say, a slower but still aggressive start, and it felt like we were going to see some sort of pop-offs from them. They were starting to get some of those kills. Of course, Herwin happens to find the exact shot that he needs to be able to find it through time and space kill, or through space and time kill, I should say. But it slowly transitioned from this, like level 5 team for the Dragons to Bolt's victories. I mean, once they get those 3 kills online, you can already see the next highlight immediately. It jumps up 3-4. They ended up with a 3-for-1 trade, and I think it ended up being a really big pivot, more or less around the 12-minute mark for the Bolts.
This just kind of came down to a war of attrition here for the Olympus Bolts, and they had all the sustain you could ask for and some with this Yamoja. Awesome Jake just really helping his team, and the patience as well from the Bolts. Very important to highlight that here, Gore, because the Odin cage could have certainly put a damper on the Olympus Bolts and all of their team fight sustain, but the way that they chose to play around that Odin cage just put so much pressure onto Sam. He was really the only consistent member for Beads Burn and Relics Burns in general off the Fear No Evil, but the Olympus Bolts, they had no issues just biding their time, waiting for the Fear No Evil to go down, waiting for the Odin cage to go down, and then that's when they looked for their chance to strike.
And it's given me a little bit of flashbacks for those who don't remember back in Phase 1. Once the group stage started, these two didn't play each other until the playoffs, but when they did play each other for like a regular season set, Dragons won Game 1, Bolts won Game 2, and then won Game 3 right afterward with a pretty similar turnaround as this one. So I'm curious to see if they can keep up this pressure, how the Dragons are going to adapt in picks and bans.
And you could even see for Hurrywin, he had 25,000 damage, but Bisky Lady bringing us some of the best when it comes to that Smite Pro League meme material. Loving the usage here of this. Is it still trademark of Shrek at this point? I think the Olympus.
I don't know. I don't see Shrek here technically, so I
just see the bolts personally. I just see the bolts.
Exactly, and it's on the to-do list. I don't know how well that, like, for Shrek universe, the dragon becomes like Donkey's girlfriend, wife, something like that. I don't know what the actual relationship status is, but you definitely don't want to kill your best friend's wife at that point. But if you're just the Bolts, you do want to slay the dragons.
The Bolts definitely looking to see if they can continue to be Dragon Slayers like they were in game number 2, but this is a tough spot now for the Bolts core as they find themselves in that second pick position. Jade Dragons going to choose to eliminate that Morgan first and foremost. Seems as though Venenu's not going to have his way with that Morgan anytime soon. A lot of teams placing preference towards that ban up against the Olympus Bolts.
Yeah.
And Bolts, I'm sure, follow suit, but they'll be the ones having to take away the Tiamat this time.
I'm interested to see it because I think it's specifically been Phase 2 that it's really jumped up to the top. But this, the Morgan has been banned out against Vin more in the last few weeks than I would argue maybe last year combined. Like, I mean, it has been a go-to pick for them. It has been devastating if they get the right combos on their hands. Sometimes they don't even need the right combos. It's just Vin playing Morgan that makes it threatening. And so I like the Dragons banning it. I also like the fact that they're putting some leverage on the fact that they're first pick.
And the other thing of note, too, from that second game that we saw between the Jade Dragons and Bolts, I actually felt like the damage numbers were relatively similar, aside from the fact that, Hurrywin was clearly leading the way in player damage, but it just felt like the Jade Dragons weren't able to actually find all of their damage at a singular given instance.
Yeah.
And you kind of have to have that steep burst of damage whenever you're dealing with the likes of a sustained composition. But with Fafnir now being banned away, starting to wonder if this is the Jade Dragons alluding to the fact that they want to take that Yemoja pick for themselves yet again.
I mean, this will be, as of right now, the first game this set. Artemis is available if Yemoja makes it through, which she won't, so we can take that one off the board. The Ymir is still available. Fafnir finally getting removed, maybe limiting some of those pickups that you're going to be able to grab for the supports. But it opens up the dual lane to be aggressive.
Mercury is also open for the first time in forever up against the likes of Sam, but it is going to be a frontline priority here for the Jade Dragons as they take that Ymir for themselves. However, plenty of options here for the Bolts. You mentioned the Artemis Gore. You mentioned the likes of Frontline still wanting to be, I think, a heavy priority here. And Haddix as well, what are your thoughts on, as far as the switch-up is concerned, from that Sobek to the King Arthur?
I mean, King Arthur, it was like night and day, right? Sobek, you had highlighted it perfectly, which is Sobek can be a great solo lane pickup for you, but it depends on how your carries are doing. It's not just what can you do on your own. His King Arthur for Haddix, he doesn't care how Bara and Vin are doing. He's going to make them do well because he will do well. And I think that's kind of the opener. This Osiris as well. Like, if you put Haddix on something he can play aggressive on, he is going to be able to help guide the team. If you put him on something that it is very good frontline but setup oriented, you really have to hope the pressure on Vin and Bara is light.
And that's the thing, is that the Jade Dragons, with that Ymir in that first lock position, have to assume that this was meant to be not intimidation to the fullest extent of what that word means, but it's definitely trying to dissuade the Olympus Bolts from wanting to opt towards that Artemis, because Ymir has such great lockdown potential against a god that doesn't have any sort of real escape aside from that wild hunt. But there's the Mercury pick that I was kind of hoping would actually get to come through. We haven't seen Sam on this pick in so long. A lot of teams opting to ban it away from him given how much success the Jade Dragons have been able to find with that choice. But Mercury, I think, could definitely struggle here a little bit in terms of his initiation prowess, just because of the fact that Osiris, Artemis, they both do have relatively strong disengage against that first initiation step.
The good news is that Ymir's there. Like, if Sam's going to play this Mercury the way that he has in the past, I can imagine, all right, Sam, go in, get the beads, get whatever disengage that Artemis is going to want from you. I'm going to throw up a wall then, and good luck, Bara, right? Have fun with that, deal with it. I think there's a lot of CC that's going to come through if they can combo it right, but again, stars have to align. Like, that Merkle goes way farther than you can deploy a Ymir wall, so the stars really have to be able to align for that one. But it's so interesting to see it because while it's not been infallible, Sam has lost one game on this Mercury this year. It's something that has been such an easy go-to the point where the Bolts, and I think notably a lot of people after the playoffs, it was a must ban. The fact that they let it through and get locked in here could prove problematic.
A ton of interrupt, though, for the Bolts with the introduction of this Horus. Now have to believe that that is likely going to be Horus for Awesome Jake in the support role, but not only that, I think that Horus has a great disengage as well with that ultimate that could potentially be the saving grace here for Barracuda, because right now, if Game 3 is anything like Games 1 and 2, Gore, Jade Dragons have already let it be known that their sole mission is trying to punish this duo lane and make sure Barracuda doesn't get a chance to actually play the game, because when he does, we see what happened with that ROM performance in game number 2, and the hypercarry potential is just as strong, if not more so, with the Artemis.
I like that they've kind of, I feel like, I don't want to use the phrase learned their lesson, but kind of learned their lesson. Like, they spent so many bans in game 1 specifically trying to target down Panda Cat. In game 2, they threw a little less, but still a couple of bans towards Panda Cat. I think this is a good adaptation from the Bolts, where it's just like, you know what? If we're going to beat you, it's not going to be by making you uncomfortable on you know, a various and sundry hunter that you play all the time anyway. It's going to be by making the team around you a little less comfortable. Unfortunately, Ymir, Mercury, Soul, those are all great Dragons picks, so they're really trying to limit, I think, these last two and find the way to control it, and that's where that Horus comes in.
I'm almost wondering if there's a possibility for a Kraken or a Cthulhu to make their way into this Jade Dragons composition, because both of those, I think, would be really strong frontline assets. And not only that, but when you add more walls on top of the Ymir wall, it can be very difficult to actually keep Artemis alive with all the lockdown. And I think it also just would make a prime environment for Mercury and this Soul to really come in for the collapse and follow-up punish.
And we got to see that Cthulhu the other day, or not even the other day, yesterday. That first set comes through, first game, and it looks good doing so. Granted, they had the Artemis that time around, and they also had a Tiamat, maybe a little helpful in terms of the team fights, but FineOK has showcased this year and recently that he can win on that pick, which I think is the big deal. Cthulhu took a long little pause, a hiatus from being seen here, and so something that could come through. There's a lot of good solo laners available. It's just what has a good matchup versus Osiris and will help in that late game fight against the Artemis. That's the difficulty to find the right one.
Pendicat as well, I think, would probably want to try and fall back to some old habits here with the Panzaburu now making its way. This is the first time he'll actually get a chance to play this god this set. There's been a very heavy focus from the Bolts in trying to keep Pendicat off this god specifically, and a large portion of that probably due to the fact that Panda, whenever he gets to Danzaburo, he just looks like he's in a league of his own playing it.
And I'm actually really excited to see not only the Danzaburo, but the combination. I mean, it was Danzaburo, Mercury. I guess Ymir was probably thrown in there a little bit during the Phase 1 playoffs that made it such a problem for them. But you get the Cthulhu, you get the Soul for Heroin, which has been a signature pick right next to the Giannis. So usually it's when the Giannis is banned, not when it's available and he just ignores the other. But it's a good comfort pick for the Dragons here. I think that their draft feels like them, which is a really, really good showing going into Game 3.
Would probably lean a little bit more, though, in the Bolts' favor in terms of actual crowd control for the setup, although I do like the Jade Dragons, but with the Ymir and the Cthulhu, that is a ton of just beefy front line, up-in-your-face presence. Not to mention Cthulhu just makes team fights chaotic in general with how much clutter he throws into the space where the team fight is actually taking place.
I'm excited to watch this. Baba Yaga with this much setup in front of her. Like, Baba Yaga, Artemis, look, you make it 20 minutes. Honestly, Artemis doesn't need it. Even Baba Yaga doesn't need it as much anymore. But 15 minutes in, a good team fight from the Bolts is going to just, their damage numbers are going to skyrocket for those two carries. And they have the setup necessary to do so. That taunt is going to be so clean with the follow-up they have behind it. But there's so much to counteract that, or to even get into the backline. I mean, Mercury is at least going to make them feel uncomfortable. The damage that can come down from them in combination with the Cthulhu is going to be a lot. The same thing with the Ymir. The Dragons have enough to make the Bolts feel uncomfortable, and the Bolts have enough to just absolutely run over the Dragons in the middle of a team fight. It's just a toss-up to who gets a better engage each and every fight.
This could be a really tough match, though, for Sam on that Mercury, because I am seeing a ton of early game pressure from the front line out of the Bolts. Osiris, Horus, Erlang Shen, all great harassers for the likes of a Mercury, and if Mercury is not able to actually hit that mid to late game stride where the sonic booms can then begin to feel a little bit more impactful, you almost have to wonder how feasible it is for the Jade Dragons to actually play through their jungle here, but we don't have to wonder about it any longer, Gore, because it's going to be Jade Dragons and Olympus Bolts coming down to the wire here in Game 3. Dolson, Mifflin, all yours.
In a weekend of 2-0s, we finally get a game number 3, and
thank you, Base Tendu.
You're right. He was the one who wrote the script. You said you wrote the script for the last game.
Yeah, it was a
right?
lie.
Right.
Everybody knew it was a lie. It was so far-fetched that I would be the one writing the script.
Yeah, God Production said that because yesterday it was DJ minus 90K for you, and then it was what? DJ.
Stop outing me.
Teddy Grams for Graham Hindu Man Hadfield today. I appreciate all of that. Jade Dragons and the Olympus Bolts, they're going to go the distance here. We figured they might. We figured that this could be a back-and-forth set. Game 1 gave us some pause, though, because the Jade Dragons decimate the Olympus Bolts. And then it took a little bit of time for the Olympus Bolts to get their footing in Game 2, but they were able to get their footing, and then things felt comfortable with the engage from that point on. Now there are some serious pivots really on both sides. Sanford Soccer finally gets his Mercury, and admittedly a Mifflin. That's where my eyes go.
Yeah, that Mercury is going to be a huge determining factor, especially considering how immobile this Artemis is. But my eyes goes towards the entirety of this Olympus Bolts draft. This is a high execution
I don't care about your one. I want all
composition. Like, and that's a buzzword I think we throw around a lot on the casting team. High execution. What does that mean? It means that a comp that has very narrow win conditions. How do you win these team fights? Well, it's off the back of CC that is admittedly very hard to apply. 9 Turns Blessing is the best AoE crowd control we're seeing here from the Olympus Bolts. Otherwise, it's Caledonian Boar, a single target from the awesome Jake, and that's so hard to use.
Jake dashes in but gets frozen by PBM. He'll dash away, sprint pop, by Polar Bear Mike. He wants some more. Jake walking back in here as well. Remember how game 1 spiraled out of control when a trade just like that went the way of the Jade Dragons. This one, neither team with a big advantage. Jake uses his blink, PBM uses his sprint. Both hunters still have their beads, and Panda Cat might need them, but instead PBM wishes he had some beads. Oh, the throw back in from Panda Cat, unfortunately. Not enough. An awesome Jake on the board first here for the Olympus Bolts.
Man, I can almost hear the comms from the Bulls here. Yo, he used his heavenly, boys. And Lazarus is like, oh, word? I'm on the way, boys. And he immediately comes in and shuts down that immovable ice giant. That is a tough start because we've said it plenty of times. Ymir is the god of what does Hindu say? Feast or famine? If you're ahead, you're feeling pretty good about it. When you fall behind, well, his comeback mechanics are not the greatest. We could see PBM start to shift up his level priority order, considering that Haddix and Barracuda are going to struggle mightily with his walls, even Lasbra, if that ultimate isn't available. Maybe we see him put a little bit more priority towards the ice wall.
Good news is it was relatively quick and easy. PBM's able to get back to lane. He can still throw up a wall, still throw out a freeze. And so it's not all said and done. Good news as well for the Jade Dragons. That's awesome Jake, who ends up picking up the kill. But look at this. Venenu and Lasbra, they're going to combine in towards Hurrywind. Red buff dropped down and secured by Venenu. The Olympus Bolts, they're just keeping up this pressure. And it's Lasbra who's supplying a lot of it, at least on the red buff invade. And then right place, right time there for first blood.
Yeah, if Hurrywind isn't Yanis or Soul there, he's just dead. I mean, that was a textbook loop around from the Olympus Wolves. I mean, Hurrywind's got to have a little bit of whiplash trying to figure out where they were coming from. Great rotation from both Lasbra and Ven there. And the Olympus Bolts are trying to set a very quick pace here, and I think that they should keep up the pressure where they found it already around this dual lane. Don't allow PBM to get back into it.
Yeah, Polar Bear Mike still 20 seconds away from that sprint. So now Sam for Soccer Myth maybe in an awkward spot where nothing is out of control just yet. This is a very close game. Really the first blood bounty making the biggest difference. But you got a lot of pressure pushing in onto your duo lane. Hurrywind already lost out on his red buff. Lasbra has sort of been all over the map. But that's not to say the moment Sam for Soccer ticks over to level 5, we're going to see some of that signature play here on this Mercury. And I think everyone for the Bolts has to be on guard. You never know. It's going to be duo lane, mid lane, hell, even over to the solo lane onto Haddix early on here. Sam can just rip down that lane. And I think that's something we need to look for here to get the Dragons into some control here early in this game.
It is going to be a little bit harder to find that gank on the Haddix, as he does have the 9 turns blessing and a level lead already over his counterpart inside the Cthulhu. But Cthulhu does bring a fair deal of CC. As long as that Descent into Madness is available, Haddix essentially does not have an escape.
There you go. Sam for Soccer was charging the ultimate, but Haddix playing safe enough. He'll back on away. It's such an interesting, I think, unique style of jungler to play against, right? Where there's somewhat with the global ultimates, Thor, up in the air, but kind of have to use it from inside of the jungle. Can't just run down the entire lane from your opponent's tier 1 tower, essentially. And so sometimes you almost have to, you feel like maybe you have to start warding really, really deep on the enemy side of the map to get a good indicator of where Sam is, because it's such a unique play style in setting up some of those fights.
Yeah, the counter Mercury ward is between your enemy's tier 1 and tier 2 tower, because that is generally where the majority of his ganks are going to roll through. Lasbra finds Fine OK and Haddix. Nice knockup.
Fine OK dashes away, still has the ultimate, but with Sam for Soccer closing that gap, blue buff timers still pretty equal at this point here in the game, and so Lasbra and Haddix think twice about engaging onto a Cthulhu with ult and a Sam for Soccer that is likely lurking somewhere on that side of the map. So Sam for Soccer's been happy up at this point. Get the Stone Cutting Sword online, continue plugging away on some of that farm. Saw him charge up his ultimate on the right, but hasn't used it here just yet. Is there any lane, though, that you look towards? I guess maybe we've talked about Haddix, why it might be difficult to gank there, between a Baba Yaga and a Horus/Artemis. Where are you putting your chips here if you're jungling for the Jade Dragons?
Well, if you could somehow burn that ultimate off of Barracuda, that is likely the best target you've got. Ven actually talked to us a little bit about it last Monday. A nice little ward. Panda Cat going to be a little bit harder to find that gank coming his way towards Barracuda. But Ven got to talk about how much survivability Baba Yaga has with her ultimate. So much larger of a health shield as Sam for Soccer.
So this is interesting.
Still waiting. PBM, though, look how deep he is.
Right, the ward is between the tier 1 and the tier 2 tower, but Sam for Soccer has not taken that route. PBM low here. Panda Cat stunned on the backside. Awesome Jake, he's going to drop ship all of the Olympus bolts in behind PBM, but it's a massive stun from the Ymir, and that might have slowed things down. The rocket not blocked, and PBM the only one under real threat here, and it's Barracuda who picks up the kill, but San Francisco turns it around, goes back in. Awesome Jake sent back, and San Francisco returns the kill.
Support for support trade here. Hurry when Tyler making a slow rotation over, and there's really not much to fight over anymore. Instead, likely going to head on back to his lane. Ven allows an entire minion wave to go into his tower, so Hurrywin should have a slight advantage insofar as experience and maybe gank pressure. Lazarus forced to use the blink defensively.
Yeah, a couple of the bolts go back to base there. They're not in range to help Lasber out in what would have been a 2v1 up against Sanford Soccer. So Sanford Soccer now on the board, and I think Panda Cat saw who was Awesome Jake, I think, that dropped that ward between the Tier 1 and Tier 2 tower. So that allowed Sanford Soccer to take a bit of a different route to engage in onto that fight. So at least the Mercury now on the board for this Jade Dragons team, but there's so much stacking, build-up, and scaling, Myth, really on both sides. This Baba Yaga for Venenu, it's got an assist on the board already, which is great. That needs some time to stack up. It's usually been Warlock Staff, Charon's Coin, but then you got Sanford Soccer on the other side that's going to be doing some scaling, the Soul here as well. This does have the making of what could be some brawls in the late game if this type of pace keeps up.
The only thing I'm concerned about is what I brought up a little bit earlier on. The Olympus bolts in the team fight phase from even are going to have a very hard time finding CC, similar to how we saw the Jade Dragons struggling around their engagements last game where it was just Sanford Soccer able to burn off those beads. Well, it's likely going to be Barracuda for the most part, or even Hannix burning off the majority of the beads here. Whereas, take a peek at this Jade Dragons draft, it's a pretty straight cut here. Who's going to be burning beads? Polar Bear Mike, Wall Freeze. Final K, Descent into Madness, 1,800 knockup. Sanford Soccer can even do it with his own ultimate. Panda Cat from a range with a rocket can even do it himself.
How many beads? I'll hold that thought. Awesome Jake alone here. If he were to take this ultimate, looks like he's just going to reposition himself slightly towards the mid lane. Hurry win to PBM will back away. What is the most beads you've ever seen taken off by one Artemis ult?
By one Artemis ult?
Yeah.
Probably like 5. I've been playing Smite for like a decade, man.
That's true.
Artemis was like the only CC in the game when I started.
You've got a lot of data, right? Artemis was the only hunter when you were playing. I guess there are moments like that if you group up enough. You could say that about literally every ability in the game, though. Oh, if a good enough boar happens. Oh, if a good enough... If a through space and time hits all 5 members of the other team, this fight turns around. You could say that about, I guess, literally everything here. But if you play grouped up, you're definitely opening yourself up to that threat, if that's what Barracuda is looking for here. A little bit less safe on this Artemis outside of that board than what he was able to get done on the ROM, and there's still backline dive potential for the Jade Dragon. So this is going to have to be a flip of the script, a flip of the switch maybe for Barracuda. Sanford Soccer charges his ultimate, catches out onto Barracuda.
Bad boar.
Sent out, and Sanford Soccer will not be stunned. Barracuda does not have beads. That means sent right into the waiting arms of Panda Cat. And this is why Mercury gets banned against Sam, because he's able to run right down your lane and set up a kill.
Yeah, Jade Dragons dropped a sentry ward between their own Tier 1 and Tier 2 towers, saying, all right, if you guys want to be safe from Sanford Soccer, you're going to have to work a little bit harder than that, and it creates that space for him to go ahead and ult on through the lane. And, well, Barracuda, a little bit out of range on the Caledonian Boar, forced to walk into the jungle, meets Breznov for his efforts.
Red buff is going to respawn at the right time here for the Jade Dragons, who have this timer. The bolts are going to close this gap, so the Jade Dragons have to be quick, but are they quick enough? Lasbra, he's got some damage, some CC maybe in onto Hurrywind. Awesome Jake still closing that gap, and now he's alone between a few members of the Jade Dragons. It's a knock-up over onto Panda Cap, and now Jake left alone, and look at Hurrywind, he's free in the backline, just pouring out damage into Awesome Jake, who ends up going down for his troubles. It's a red buff lost in a support in the dirt.
Jade Dragons clawing their way back into this one. It still is a slight paltry gold lead for the Olympus Bolts here, just a couple hundred separating these two teams. It's more so about the experience across the board, and the Olympus Bolts are feeling pretty all right about it. About a half-level lead in both the jungle and mid,
this helps.
And it's Gold Fury getting looked at. Yeah, that's pretty nice.
This helps for the Bolts if they're able to secure it.
Nobody's
and look at the Jade Dragons. Look at the reply. There is none. It's going to be Hurrywood still farming it up in the mid lane. PBM was walking on over towards the Gold Fury, but won't be in time, and that's going to get the Olympus Bolts right back in the lead as far as gold goes, just shy of 1,000. But the answer from the Jade Dragons is let's put some pressure on the Pyromancer over here on the right. This should get close to evening things back up, and there's no reply from the Bolts on the right-hand side. So both teams able to take some of these respawning objectives and get things back towards even.
That's just such a good call from the Olympus Bolts, recognizing that the Jade Dragons, after taking that fight and invading the red buff, were essentially all forced back to base, which creates so much space for the Bolts to go ahead and just saunter on into the neutral objective and take it away, knowing wholeheartedly that no one would be there to put up a defense. I thought maybe we'd see Haddix head over to the Pyromancer, as he was kind of in position for it, but maybe he doesn't want to throw away his life, doesn't want to risk it. Pyromancer is the consolation prize in exchanges like this, so Jade Dragons are at least going to get something, but Olympus Bolts do pull a little bit further ahead.
Venenu now completes the Charon's coin. Warlock staff, fully stacked up. That's what I'm attempting to say there. So the timer on this Baba Yaga and the unhinged damage is there.
Yeesh!
How can you help it? Well, you send Sam for Soccer over to the mid lane. Sam uses his ultimate there. Venenu uses his beads and is able to get out. Rage, an early pickup here for Sam for Soccer. Already saw a couple crits ringing out there on this Mercury. So that one-tap potential build is going to be coming online here quickly.
Man, Sam for Soccer gets more crit chance from Rage than just about any other player in the league. I just do not understand how lucky this guy is.
I think it.
Yeah, maybe you think it's going to calculate the Sam for Soccer passive onto the item?
I think the difference on the Rage, it'll say Sam for Soccer, Rage, 100% crit chance, stacks to 100 once the Rage is fully stacked. Sam for Soccer attempting to stack up some of that Rage, but he is not going to get the chance. Great potion from Venenu. Sends Sam for Soccer right back to base. Turns into the house as Haddix is rotated on over from the solo lane. PBM into Shards of Ice. The Boar flying on through from Barracuda. Actives used from Hurrywin in the Olympus Bolts. Close the gap. And in one fell swoop, 3 members of the Dragons go down.
Man, I don't even know how Barracuda got there. I was actually so confused. I thought maybe he had blinked in like a Zardamus, but no. Just uses his feet like a mortal and is able to flank the entirety of the Jade Dragons, who had just stripped away the Tier 1 mid tower. Olympus Bolt's going to do the exact same and return it in spades. Tier 2 stripped away, and this early on, that is so much map control afforded to the Olympus Bolts. There is nowhere to escape to.
Oh, there you go. Doug helping us out a little
Appreciate
bit.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, it was the ultimate. And look, it surprises us, and we literally have a view of the entire map. Pandacat uses the rocket, though, here, 1v1 against Lazaro.
Miss once.
All of the autos connecting. Lazaro will stop the back, and because in behind, hey, look, here come the rest of the Olympus Bolts. Unfortunate for Pandacat. Which dollar is he? I'm not sure. He's the dead dollar here in a moment, as the tower will send a shot his way, and Lazaro ends up picking up the kill. I admire the effort there from Pandacat, but the Olympus Bolt's just too mobile.
Bro, he didn't miss a single auto attack, it looked like, on Lazaro, who luckily was close enough to his own tower.
But he died. It's like you could
show
just
cut it before he dies there. Even good jukes with the dollars, but that is an unfortunate collapse there for the Jade Dragons that cost them Pandacat's life, who's going to be on the grayscale screen for the next 10 or so seconds. Primal Fury spawning up very soon.
These rotations.
So Jade Dragons trying to find a pick here.
These Olympus Bolts are just rotating so quickly into these fights. Awesome Jake playing so aggressive. Barracuda's health bar dwindling, though, as Final K has found the backliner. Barra will dodge the knock-up. And what an ultimate from Awesome Jake. You don't often say that about a big defensive ultimate, but this one looks good. And now the Olympus Bolts, the kings of the second wind team fight, are re-engaging in on the Final K. Venenu with his second of the game.
It's just that counter punch style. Hurrywin now suffering the consequence.
Oh my God.
Sam for Soccer has to retreat. PBM not allowed to go back in, and while Breznov, he's clearing out his purple buff. Olympus Bolts, we've been saying it for going on 2 years now. Even back when they were the Renegades, they've been working on this kind of reactive style, this counter punch style. They hadn't quite hit their pace back in Season 7. I think we're confident enough to say they've got it here in Season 8.
Sam for Soccer dashes out of the pin here and actually catches Haddix with the ultimate. We saw a great ult from Sam earlier on. Pandacat, what are you thinking here, my friend? He thinks he wants to fight Barracuda here. PBM rotating into this fight. Barracuda taking a lot of damage from Pandacat, but it's a stun from Awesome Jake. The wall goes up from PBM. The freeze around the corner. That one's good onto Barra, and the ice should be enough damage here from the Jade Dragon support, and it is, but Awesome Jake now turns it around because, of course, Venenu's rotated over from the mid lane. The Bolts just too quick here this game. PBM with a good wall might secure his escape.
He does, gets away from that one. Lazaro a little bit too slow on the rotation to find that sickle. Slow, but not too slow to set up the defensive positioning around the Primal Fury, spawning up in just a couple of seconds. And, well, it's just the Olympus Bolts there for now. Jake, a little bit too low HP, should be forced to head back to base here, but this has been a crazy pace in this one. 13 kills in 15 minutes, and we're looking at about a 3,000 gold lead for the Olympus Bolts. High execution draft be damned, they're doing it.
They're doing it, and they're doing it well, the Olympus Bolts are. And this next Fury, we've already reached the point where it feels like this next Fury is the big one. If the Olympus Bolts get it cleanly with some fights on the back end, or with some kills, excuse me, on the back end, Dragons might be sweating a little bit about their chances of turning around game number 3 here. Fine okay on this Cthulhu, just the one death, but hasn't quite found the impact that you assume you'll get when a big Cthulhu saunters into that fight. It's just been melted on through by the bolts. That single target turnaround has just shut down the Dragons time in and time out.
It has, and now the bolts go ahead and start up the Primal Fury, but spotted out are the Jade Dragons. A couple of pings ring true from Venenu, who lets them know, hey, back up. This is a dangerous engagement. PBM's got a great wall here, but that is an interesting build coming through from Lazar. Witchblade picked up immediately, but hold that thought. Fine okay in some trouble.
Fine okay has to leave here.
Maybe
Haddix.
not.
Animosity picked up as well on the Erlong Shen. Toxic Blade, so a little bit of hybrid.
He chunks.
Shoguns and Sovereignty there. Jade Dragons take down the Pyromancer, so a small win for the Jade Dragons here, if nothing else, denying that from the Olympus Bolts. We saw this trade last time. It was Fury on one side, Pyromancer on the other, and the Jade Dragons happy enough to take that. Probably the lowest risk type play here that the Dragons can take. We know the Bolts are going to be over here. We're not confident in winning a fight. Let's take the guaranteed gold in the Pyro.
Yeah, the Dragons don't want to fight until Sanford Soccer finishes off this next item, likely going to be the Deathbringer to finish up
He's
that.
He's already got 100% crit.
Yeah, well, you got 100%, but you still want that additional crit damage. It's 30% more on every single one.
We're
Sanford
kidding,
Soccer
by the way. I can see it now. We're kidding.
Yeah, he doesn't actually have 100% crit. That's not something Sanford Soccer has, but he is incredibly lucky. I'm going to put it out there.
What if all the players had a passive?
What would PBMs be?
Oh man,
put you on the spot, huh?
Yeah, you are putting me on the spot.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I don't know. Your Ymir stun,
just Ymir,
hits everyone regardless of how bad your game started. You use the freeze at any point, and every single player on the enemy team gets frozen.
That sucks, Dave. That was awful. Man.
I don't know what. All right, Miff, what would it be?
PBM, every time he speaks in comms, bolsters his teammates.
That's already better. You're right.
Yep.
Infinitely better. Neither of us mentioned the arm sleeve, so I think we both kind of dropped the ball there at some point. Look, the Olympus Bolts, they now find themselves 2.5K gold in the lead, which not insurmountable here for the Jade Dragons, but it's got to be a big turnaround in this next fight. The Bolts happy to kind of slow things down here. Let's build up some of that farm. But we've mentioned it a couple times here, Mifflin. Does this turnaround start and end with Sanford Soccer and his effectiveness in the rest of this game?
Certainly not. Panda Cat's about to hit some pretty impressive power spikes himself, finishing up that bow build with the Atalantas. PBM has started to hit his stride as well as survivability. He's going to have a much easier time closing gap into the back line with this wing blade pickup. Very often we see him step up for the freeze and immediately get CC'd out by the bolts. Well, Magi should help out with that as well. I think that the Jade Dragons are starting to hit their power spikes and doing no small part to this Deathbringer pickup from Sanford Soccer as well. But we have not seen a true 5-on-5 engagement just yet, and that's where this Jade Dragons draft is really going to start to hit its pace. Once Final K can get involved and act as that pillar of CC for his team, that's going to open up a lot of doors for the Dragons.
Right, it does feel like it's been an attempted pick that then gets turned around by the Olympus Bolts, at least as of late here. And Awesome Jake, I think, has looked great on this Horus. Talk about picks that I'm confident that he can play, but not something we have all that much data on Awesome Jake playing. But apparently, hey, looks good. 9 turns Blessing finds its way onto Hurrywin in the mid lane, but a Disapparate and Beads are going to keep this soul alive. Wow. But Panda Cat, he's read out here by the Olympus Bolts, and it's another individual pick. It looks like Awesome Jake trying to drop ship a couple members of the Bolts in range, but nobody from the Jade Dragons will be there to find out.
Panda Cat just steps forward trying to defend Hurrywin, wants to get the taunt over the wall and walk out, and just cannot do so.
Free FG now?
Yeah, I wouldn't say free. There is still certainly steal potential. Here? Yeah, definitely contest. This lead that the Bolts have is not so much that the Dragons have to respect this.
PBM uses the wall here and gets his mag eyes popped. Final K will use the ultimate, and the Olympus Bolts turn their eyes towards the big old Cthulhu that's wandering its way on in. The Olympus Bolts waiting out this ultimate, though. This is patient play from the Bolts. Say, all right, fine, okay, you use your ult. We're going to back away, wait for it to time out, and then maybe engage afterwards.
Yeah, see in 17 seconds. Your time is up. We're turning it around.
Oh, man, he gets knocked up on the backside, and look at the Olympus Bolts. Look at the way they surge back into this fight. Hurrywin uses this Disapparate yet again, has an Aegis, but does not have the beads. Aegis gets used, but all the damage awaits around the corner. Haddix notches his second of the game.
Panda Cat does finally respawn, so it's Hurrywin and Panda Cat tagging in and out for this team fight. Olympus Bolts gonna go ahead and start up the Fire Giant yet again, and This time, I don't expect to see the Jade Dragons step up. They are too far away. They do not have the resources they need. Breznov, no ultimate. Same for Soccer, and Final K don't have theirs available either. Olympus Bolts priming themselves to maintain their lossless year so far.
I mean, that is just tough from Final K. You feel like you've got a couple members of the Bolts trapped in, but they just walk backwards, Smith. They just turn around and leave while Final K is asking for them to come back into the fight. And the Olympus Bolts were having absolutely none of it. And then they get a pick on the back end of things here. This is going to be difficult to turn around. Again, we've talked about some of the scaling that Sanford Soccer has. That's something to look out for. PandaCat has hit some of those power spikes there as well. Hurrywind getting a little bit further on in his build. But look at Venenu, the build he's gone for. Warlock Staff, fully stacked Charon's Coin. Soul Gem, Soul Reaver is there, and he has enough damage, he thinks, to build something a little bit defensive on the back end of things. This Baba Yaga alone at 3-0-6 is going to be difficult to kill.
And that's not to mention the buff that she saw to her health shield as PandaCat caught out a little bit here. Can't use the rocket to escape. He'll just get blocked.
He is trying to run away thanks to the dollar transformation there, but enough of the bolts are here that no chance. And Haddock's on a killing spree. The Erlang Shen, half defensive, half offensive with the animosity out of the solo lane, swinging for the Olympus Bolts. Lasbro with a 2v1 here. Sanford Soccer against Final K. Got the stun onto Sam, and the axe is there, and Lasbro saves his tower, gets the kill as well. And it looks like the Olympus Bolts can do no wrong. It'll be the ultimate used by Awesome Jake as well. Underneath the left side, Phoenix go the Olympus Bolts with Lasbro wasting the time of 2.
Man, Sanford Soccer just gets caught out there. That's a tough one. They're looking to end it.
Lasbro delaying out Final K. Final K will make it on back to the fountain, but it's Polar Bear Mike who will have to use the ultimate
50%.
here. The Olympus Bolts take us to a game 3, but this set will come to a close. Turn off the lights, it's all over, and the Olympus Bolts get the win.
Just one stumble on that right-hand side. That shouldn't happen, by the way. Lazra on Osiris cannot be beating a Mercury and Cthulhu together inside the tower. Descent to Madness wasn't even used. I mean, that is a crazy turnaround game. The Olympus Bolts, with a wild pace, close it out.
I can't believe it. I can't believe that's how that set turns out. Let me rephrase.
Yeah.
If I'm halfway through a statement, just kidding. I can't believe that's how it ended after what we saw in Game 1. It just felt like in Game 1, the Dragons were dialed in, and that was just how the set was going to go today. But the resilience of this Bolts team shows through time and time and time again. And we talked about it, I think, a decent bit there, Miff. That the second wind playstyle will delay out for a second, re-engage seems to be working.
It really is. It's that counterpunch they've been working on for going on 2 years now has finally been perfected as a style. If you want to beat the Olympus Bolts, you have to kill them off your engage. If you let them regroup after a team fight, they're going to win the team fight.
Add another god I'm concerned about Jake playing, I guess. The Horus,
there were some great ults.
Looks good. The ults were fantastic. They push every little lead here, the Olympus Bolts do, and they remain undefeated in Phase 2 of the SPL. That's it for Miff and I, though. We'll take a break, and then the desk will close this out.
Gonna claim that one for himself. Venenu caught in a bad spot as well, and when it rains, it pours. Van actually gonna turn it around. Uh-oh. Excuse me. Sorry, sir. John Queen. Still good in those moments. Then finds 2 from the grave, including a massive shutdown on the Panatop.
Hello, Smite fans, and welcome back to the Smite Pro League powered by Alienware. And the pro players aren't the only ones that have the option to partake in these amazing peripherals and PC setups that Alienware has been so kind as to provide to the entirety of the Smite Pro League. You too can game in all of the pro style that you could imagine and get one of those primo PCs for your own home setup. Just make sure to head on over to smitegame.com/Alienware, plug code SMITEAW for a nice little discount. And not only that, but you can also join the global arena for Alienware by heading on over to alienwarearena.com and partaking in being able to know exactly when their global giveaways are taking place. And you can also keep up to date with all things Alienware by following them on social medias for Instagram and Twitter at Alienware for both of those respective platforms. And again, thank you so much to Alienware for being our title sponsor here for the Smite Pro League in Season 8. And I don't think it was just the Alienware gear alone that was making the Bolts look this good this weekend, Gore. I think that was just a fantastic showing of Smite between these two teams, but trust me, Jade Dragons did not make it easy for them.
There were just so many good moments, I think, throughout the last game for the Bolts specifically. Game 1, you get to see the Dragons put on a showcase, right? Game 2, it's very even, but this third game felt very much Bolts-oriented and Bolts-centric. There were just so many good turnarounds, good fights from them. We got to talk about it in picks and bans, but then see it come to fruition, the way that Baba Yaga and the Artemis started to meld with the team. I mean, everything just melted together perfectly for them.
And a lot of that stemmed, I think, from that original frontline pressure that Awesome Jake was able to provide with the Horus. Also, a pretty interesting switch up here. Haddock's actually the one on the Erlong Shen and Lasbra.
Yeah.
Osiris jungle has seemed to be the flavor of the past couple of weeks, and for good reason. Lasbra just had so much control, really did not let Sam breathe for even an instant. And without Sam, I think, being able to consistently find those big tonic booms, there wasn't really a whole lot of early to mid-game presence for the Jade Dragons to try and counteract a lot of that early triple warrior front line from the Bolts.
Now, there's an ult we just saw there from Jake that was maybe one of the biggest moments in my mind. There were a lot of good fights from the Dragons. It looked like they were going to win. That ult let them reposition and engage on that fight, and they just come through and clean it up. A little before that, we saw a moment in mid where things looked clean, and of course Lasbra, as you had highlighted, something that he was bringing into the jungle was the Osiris. Not only did it look good, he got to 2v1 at the very end of the game as well, just to showcase he had it. The front line for this team, switching Haddock's onto specifically something that maybe wasn't going to do as much damage as what Lasbra put out, but was going to have the setup needed for the team and everything like that. This draft was really well done and really well executed from the Bolts, and I honestly want to go home and just watch that game again.
It's such a tragic moment there for Sam at the end, too, because the special delivery, while it created some space, unfortunately, the tether stun effect had already gone into effect there, which is the main reason why you saw him get stunned. A little distance out, but little nitpicks aside, I do think that the Jade Dragons have certainly let it be known. This is shaping up to be a pretty nice storyline, though, for this second split, Gore. Have to remember a lot of this narrative, some striking similarities to Split 1.
And this was like, well, I guess not this. There's no Dragons behind me. The Dragons were supposed to be the team that absolutely just decimated everybody. That's all anyone could talk about when the teams were announced. They were like, man, y'all really let this team come through? Like, anybody thought this was fair? And lo and behold, we're looking at a team in the Bolts instead that are undefeated from kind of wishy-washy last year to just consistent, really fun games this year.
And the Bolts, they have certainly bolted to the top of the standings, and we've even got Awesome Goat standing by for the post-game interview. Don't worry, Jake. I had to give you the introduction that your team deserved.
Hello there.
I'm a big fan, by the way, of the chair spin around. A lot of dramatic effect behind that one.
Thank you. You know, it's just nice to be on top, and I'm just looking down at all the other teams, and they're just down there, and it's nice to be up here.
How was it, by the way, playing from your boat? I also really like the yacht presence that you had for us here today, and I'm surprised that we actually didn't get to see the background from space for all that looking down that you're talking about.
Yeah, unfortunately, I had to get off my yacht to play the games. But during picks and bans, I was chilling, sipping on some margaritas, and just going through picks and bans. But yeah, it's really nice.
And getting back on track, I think, to some more SMITE-related topics. I don't want you to turn into a Barrett Jr., with too much distractions on the interviews here. But, Jake, for the team, what was the primary focus for you guys throughout each of these sets? Because we noticed a lot of this Triple Warrior front line coming through, and it seemed like you guys really managed to switch things up this weekend.
I think we just have a pretty good grasp on what's good, and good team synergy. Because whenever I do get first blooded sometimes, and I'm feeling pretty bad, but my team is it's okay, we got it, we can do it, and they make me feel pretty good. And we're just always in the games, and you can never count us out, even if we lose a game, because that's just the warm-up, Yeah.
I respect it. I respect it for sure, but thank you guys so much for putting on a show to close things out here in week number 3. Congratulations to you and the rest of the team for making yourselves 5-0 number 1 seed for the time being. We'll see if the pressure can continue in weeks to come, but for right now, enjoy the rest of your game with the rest of your team. And again, congratulations on the victory.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. See you later, Jake. Have a good one. Now, I'm sure the team synergy, Gore, is the main thing that I think is important to highlight here. You could even probably hear it from the Bolts background. That house alone sounded like they were definitely in some heavy celebratory fashion. But I do find it interesting how Jake mentions the fact that, whenever one of us happens to slip up, you can always rely on the other 4 to immediately either uplift or just make a play to make up for it. And I just think that says a lot for a team environment when they're able to feel that comfortable with each other. And as far as the standings and the schedule are concerned, for everything else leading up here, guys, you have to remember Bolts are sitting pretty now at the top, but next week, or as the week's conclusion, Jade Dragons versus Olympus Bolts, that was our closure for today. But a very interesting week 3, to say the least. Had a lot of 2-0s minus that last set, but again, Olympus Bolts sitting pretty here with a 5-0 in that number 1 spot. Camelot Kings, Atlantis Leviathans, they're hot on their heels, however, and same for the Tartarus Titans, as Jade Dragons will likely go back to the drawing board. But you have to remember, Gore, this is definitely feeling a lot more of a tight-knit race than what the standings might allude.
Yeah, and we're not quite halfway through, so there's still some wiggle room, but we had talked about it earlier. Good news for the Titans, having the Bolts win that one, because I guess bad news that the Bolts are now another step away.
Yes.
But better news because it created a larger gap between them and the Dragons. That's really the goal for them, having that 3-2 to 2-3. Of course, looking towards the Leviathans, looking towards specifically the Kings as well, who are both up there at 3-1. That's where I think the Titans have their eyes on. Same thing for the Dragons right now, just trying to pull away from the rest of the pack down in the bottom 4. But the Bolts are sitting pretty, into the point where, looking towards their next couple of weeks, things don't necessarily get easier for them, but this is a good position for them to be in. And honestly, if they could keep this run going, 5-0 is one thing. But come on, 6-0, that's the next. That's a little better. If they can keep that pace going, I'm sure that's what they have in mind. It could really set a precedent for a ridiculously long win streak.
Wouldn't be surprised if the Bolts are aiming for a perfect split too. I think that's every competitive player's dream, is to go undefeated for at least one segment of the year, because how else do you establish yourself as a powerhouse team if not by proving it with the gameplay and the performances? On the other hand, though, Gore, I do want to break it down a little bit more, kind of reel things back a bit. We've seen all the success, and I would say even still, we are only in week 3.
Yeah.
I think the Jade Dragons have certainly proven to us with just this past weekend alone that their place in the standings is not one that I think is very indicative of how their performances have actually been from this past weekend.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest thing to note, specifically because we didn't get, I want to say, the full potential for some teams. Bolts Scarabs maybe didn't hit the level that we expected it to, because they weren't able to have everybody there for the Scarabs. Same thing for Titans Leviathans yesterday, which causes a little bit of a fun fork in the standings for it, but it also keeps things a little more interesting, because next week, 2 weeks from now, 3 weeks from now, watching some of those teams that either fell, the Dragons today as well, it's not going to be the same way, right? If the Dragons go up against the Kings, it's going to be a great set, but they could start winning that one. Same thing against the Leviathans, Titans, etc., etc.
And as you guys can tell with the Week 4 schedule, what you have on the horizon here, starting off hot on Friday, Atlantis Leviathans versus the Camelot Kings.
That's gonna be good.
Those two are certainly going to be looking to establish themselves in that top 3 against the Olympus Bolts. But not only that, Oni Warriors versus Solar Scarabs, another set that could really go either direction here. Olympus Bolts with that rematch into the Atlantis Leviathans. We've got Jade Dragons against the Camelot Kings. Solar Scarabs versus the Valhalla Valkyries on Sunday. And then Oni Warriors versus the Tartarus Titans to close us out. A lot of these games, Gore, I think, really looking to go either direction.
Yeah, I think if for some reason, if you can't watch Leviathans versus Kings, first off, shame on you. That's going to be awesome. Saturday you shouldn't miss Saturday. Next Saturday's sick. That's going to be some awesome games coming through. Watching the Bolts Leviathans and then what was the Dragons Kings? Like that is going to be some awesome Smite to watch.
The entirety of next weekend,
God,
I think, is going to be a whole load of fun, not even just for us, but for also your guys' viewing pleasures back at home. But from all of us here at the studios, to all of you guys sitting pretty in Smite Game Chat, thank you guys so much for tuning in for Week 3 of the Smite Pro League powered by Alienware. And remember, you want to make sure that you're back here next Friday because the entire weekend is going to be an exciting one. So for now, enjoy the rest of your night, and we'll see you guys next time.
Thank you.